a village board meeting. It is Monday, November 25th, and it's 7:02. I'd ask the clerk to please take the roll call.
Trustee Bachner. Here. Trustee Karji. Here. Trustee Vasquez. Here. Trustee Brennan.
Here.
Trustee Hennick.
Here.
Trustee O'Connell.
Here.
President Odusi.
Here. And if I can ask everyone to please stand to say the Pledge of Allegiance with us. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. See this? Okay. All right. Wow. It's unanimous. It's all dear. So,
Oh dear.
yeah, oh dear. So if you all don't mind, we've got just a few things before that. I think it would make sense, unless somebody objects to it, to wait for the comments when we get to 9, 10A. Is that okay? No one objects? Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, so then we'll move ahead to elected officials' comments and announcements. And I'll ask Erica Bachner to begin, if you don't mind.
Thanks. So I'd like to do an acknowledgement of land. And so as we begin, we are mindful that we hold these meetings on land that was once and still is inhabited by Indigenous people, including the Ojibwa, the Chippewa, Menominee, and Potawatomi nations, and more. And we will remember our nation's history and honor the Native people as stewards of this land that was colonized, and that River Forest continues to be a place many people from diverse backgrounds can live and gather. So, happy Thanksgiving in advance to everybody. And just wanted to provide an update on the Census 2020 work. Kathy, thank you for putting a note in the village newsletter. Very much appreciate that. In our last meeting, we identified the major talking points that are relevant to River Forest and the timeline that we're going to be using to push out certain pieces of information. So right now, the Census Bureau is really looking for people to work as people who will be going door to door, handling data, et cetera, et cetera. So to the extent that anybody is interested in temporary work, there's a lot to be there with the census. So please go to census2020.gov to get more information about that. And I think at this point we've got a pretty robust website that you can see if you go to the village website. There's a great page on some of the specifics around the census. And so thank you to John Pape for that, really helpful, and also keeping us in the loop with all the grants and information. And there are certain groups that we still need to make sure that we're connecting to make sure that everybody understands how important it is to complete the census. So underrepresented people, people who have young children who aren't necessarily applying to schools yet. Often those children don't get documented into the system, and they are really important as well. So, yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Yep. Yeah, every person counts. Just to augment what Erica said, the reason census is it's important for many reasons, but the number one reason is one, we want to make sure that we know everybody that lives in River Forest, and second, the count helps us get reimbursed by the state, so that your income tax specifically is based on a per capita. So the more we can count you, the more money comes back to our community based on your income tax. So everybody counts. So thank you. Tom?
Other than to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving and thank you for coming on. Nothing.
Okay, great. Thanks. Russ?
Three things. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. And the second thing is I wanted to report on our River Forest Dementia Friendly group. We met earlier this afternoon. We continue to talk about how our group is meeting with the businesses to provide training for them for dementia friendly training, and also giving them a decal on their windows so people know that when they're become and complete their training, so they're dementia friendly. Also, on the social activities, on the Lake Theater, we're going to be sponsoring 2 screenings of The Wonderful Life for our seniors, and everyone is welcome, not just our seniors. There's 2 showings. One they're at December 18th at 1 p.m. and then at 7 p.m. Free of charge. The other thing is that also the Oak Park Memory Cafe. We're working with River Forest seniors as well, who are invited. So far, the group is growing, and both from Oak Park River Forest residents, and interesting enough, it's growing with couples, not just individuals. So we're going to continue doing that. And our next meeting is going to be on January 27th due to the holidays in December. Last but not least, I'm happy to report that, as you know, we have been recognized as dementia friendly, and we then pursued an application to become an age-friendly community. And I'm happy to say that with the help of Eric and Sarah, we completed the long application, and we're successful, and we just received our certification. So we're continuing to make efforts on that. So thank you.
Thank you. Nice.
Something else.
Yeah, that's great. It's very big. Yeah.
Another badge.
Now we gotta work hard at keeping it.
Correct.
Right. Okay, thank you, Russ. Katie?
I just wanted to give an update on the results of our Great Pumpkin Smash.
Yeah.
After Halloween, we hold that at Roosevelt Middle School, and the numbers are in. We collected and smashed 512 pumpkins this year, which was 4,860 pounds of pumpkins. And I wanted to give this report because there are a couple of articles in the paper that focused about the pumpkin. Oh, yeah, thank you very much, John. This was the dumpster that Strom provided free of charge for us at the middle school for the pumpkins. And I wanted to mention this because there were a couple articles in the paper about Oak Park's pumpkin smash and how the kids were rolling the pumpkins down the hill, and it was great fun. And really, those articles didn't focus on why we do this. And the reason why we do this is that pumpkins, if they're in the landfill, they produce methane, which is 20 times the warming effect of CO2. So there's a reason why we are collecting your pumpkins free of charge and keeping them out of the landfill, and also keeping them out of the street with the leaf collection, because that can be dangerous. And also, we pay for the leaf collection by the ton. So if offsetting global warming isn't enough of a reason for you, then you'll be happy to know that we saved the village $125 this year by the pumpkin smash.
Yay.
Yay.
Every dollar counts.
So participate next year.
Yeah. Thank you, Katie.
Good evening. I have just a couple things. The first is I wanted to congratulate the OPRF students who scored perfect scores on the ACT. Unfortunately, I don't have all the names with me. I know we have at least one River Forest resident, Garrett Creedy. So, but congratulations to all of them. That's an accomplishment. The second thing is I have a personal plug. For those of you who don't know, I'm the coordinator of the Holiday Food and Gift Basket Program for Oak Park and River Forest. This program provides Thanksgiving gift cards to low-income families, and then also I recruit sponsors to purchase gifts for all of our participants. The other piece I need, and part of all of that, is I need drivers to help deliver the gifts in Oak Park and River Forest on Saturday, December 14th. We'll be at United Lutheran Church, which is located at Ridgeland and Greenfield. We start about 8 o'clock. You don't have to come right at 8, but I suggest coming probably before 10, because I never quite know how long it's going to take to clear the church. So if you want to help spread some holiday cheer, come out to the church on December 14th. Thank you, and happy Thanksgiving. Safe travels to anybody traveling for the holiday. Oh, one last plug. If you happen to be doing your Christmas shopping over the long holiday, please remember to shop local. We have some great stores. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob.
First off, I want to thank the village president, trustees for taking care of me while I was traveling the last couple of weeks. I apologize, but sometimes my schedule doesn't always fall into place. So thank you for letting me participate via the phone. Just a shout out to the Public Works Department. I know you guys have been working like crazy with leaves all over the place, and then Mother Nature throws a little snow at you and then throws a little frost on top of it. I know it's a big effort, so congratulations to you and your team. You've been doing a great job. I always remember my father saying when we lived on Keystone that on Saturday nights he'd go out and he'd stand in the streets and it'd be like the burning of Atlanta because people would throw cigarettes in the leaves. And so
my.
I don't see much of that going on anymore. So congratulations to you and your team. And just lastly, happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Travel safe, and we've got a big holiday season coming up. So everybody, please enjoy themselves and be safe.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Well, I just have a few things to announce. I'm as part of my role as village president, I also serve on the Community Foundation Community Works Advisory Board, Oak Park and River Forest. They have a subcommittee called the Leadership Lab, of which I have been chosen to chair, and I've been chairing it for now the last, I think, 2 years. And what Leadership Lab is, it is taking people, key folks that want to be a leader in our community throughout Oak Park and River Forest, and putting them through kind of a training program. I know Patty and Russ has gone through it. And it's trying to take future leaders and getting them connected and networked to causes and issues that we as a community often face. And so Russ is a great example. Patty's a great example of taking issues like aging. Russ has been very involved in the aging issue, and that was an issue that when he was in the training class at the Leadership Lab, it was an issue that kind of he and his team tackled. So it's an important leadership. It's an important initiative for the Community Foundation. So I had a meeting with the Leadership Lab. We gave a readout at the advisory board, and then I did a little filming. So maybe you'll see that come out in the newspapers promoting the Leadership Lab for our community. I also went to the Oak Park River Forest Historical Society Museum Gala this past, I think it was Friday. So it was quite nice. We identified several key folks in our community that have done quite a lot in the historicals for the historical purposes. I think that's pretty much what I've done, and I want to wish everybody here and that might be seeing us. Are we on streaming live, YouTube? All right. I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, and as Bob said, travel safe to wherever you might go. Okay, with that, we'll close our public comments and move on to a public hearing.
So I would, Madam Chairperson, I would just ask that you call the public hearing to order.
Okay, I'd like to call the public hearing to order.
All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let the record reflect that this is a public hearing being held pursuant to the requirements of Section 10 and 20 of the Bond Issue Notification Act of the State of Illinois as amended. Notice of this hearing was published on November 18th, 2019 in the Chicago Sun-Times, a newspaper of general circulation in the village. This is a hearing regarding a plan to issue not to exceed $525,000 in aggregate principal amount of the village's general obligation limited tax bonds. The proceeds of the bonds will be used to pay for public infrastructure projects within the village and the issuance, certain costs of the issuance of the bonds. The bonds will be issued by the village in accordance with the provisions of Section 15 of the Local Government Debt Reform Act of the State of Illinois, as amended, and shall constitute a general obligation of the village payable from non-referendum bond proceeds in accordance with provisions of the municipal code, which will not exceed 0.5% of the assessed value of all taxable property within the village. The public hearing is required by Sections 10 and 20 of the Bond Issue Notification Act of the State of Illinois as amended. At the time and place set for the public hearing, residents, taxpayers, and other interested persons will be given the opportunity to express their views for or against the proposed plan of financing the issuance of the bonds and the purpose of the issuance of the bonds. So just to remind the board, this is part of our debt service extension base where we get, the state allows us to issue a limited amount of bonds for a public purpose as we see fit. The last two times we've done a 2-year note. Those proceeds have been put into our infrastructure bond fund to be used for additional street resurfacing, sidewalk repair, things like that. So these dollars go directly into infrastructure purposes. And so at this time, and I'm sure that's why everyone's here tonight, is to comment on the bond issuance. But if there is anyone who wants to make a public comment on this, this would be the time to do so. Seeing none, and
Did you have something, Patty?
No, but Eric, I wonder, could you maybe just give a brief explanation or point to why we would go this route in terms of issuing these bonds as a revenue source, like why that would be beneficial?
right, and so the state of Illinois, as a non-home rule community, provides a limited opportunity for the village to issue debt. The only debt on the books right now that the village has is the principal and interest for our sewer project that we did several years ago, and that's a note through the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency and paid for out of water and sewer revenue. So the only other opportunity we have for debt, unless we go to a referendum and ask the taxpayers to pay for a particular project or purpose, is this very limited scope, and we could take it out for a small amount of years. We could extend it out even longer. We have found that there are continuing infrastructure needs within the community. So to the extent we have this available, we've used that for those purposes. And in the event something larger scale comes up in the future, by doing only a 2-year note provides us the flexibility to re-examine this in a couple of years.
Thank you. I just thought it'd be helpful for people who maybe didn't know.
It's not very often I get to talk about this, and people actually have a captive audience and have to listen. So I have not received any written comments from any members of the public or any interested taxpayers. I have not seen anyone. It doesn't appear anyone wants to show up tonight to talk about this item. So with that, Madam President, I would then ask for a motion and a second to close the public hearing.
Okay, do I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing?
Motion to close the public hearing.
Here's a second.
Second.
Okay. If I can ask the clerk.
Yeah, voice vote would be fine.
Yeah, you can say the voice.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And so we'll have a bond ordinance that will come up at a subsequent meeting that you would vote on, and then we
Great.
would proceed from there.
Exactly. Okay, thank you, Eric. All right, so next up is our consent agenda. I'd like to get a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items A through J.
Can we pull C
Yep.
out?
Sure, we could take C. Anybody else?
G.
G? Okay. All right, then if I can get any other pullouts? If I can get a motion then to approve everything but C and G and a second, then we'll move on those.
I move that we approve the consent agenda, items A through J with the exception of C and G.
Yep, thank you.
Second.
Okay. Any questions or comments on those items?
I did have a couple questions about the construction, the change orders on the construction projects. With regard to Harlem, is the question, the reason that we didn't know about the problem because it wasn't discoverable until after they started construction?
Which one are you on? I'm sorry.
It's
I don't think it's C.
Is it C?
Denise.
It's not C.
It's not C and it's not
It's
G.
E.
E and F.
Okay,
So E is Harlem, the issue is with Harlem, and then F is with regard to the alleys.
right.
Correct.
The issue with Harlem was the depth of the patches and the length. So
Yes.
okay, so the length that we originally anticipated wasn't as long as what turned out to be the case, and then the depth needed to be deeper due to how deep the patches
Right, but my
needed to be
question is,
repaired.
how do we not know that when we put the bid documents together?
Well, so we used a different type of materials to get it to cure faster called high early concrete, and that wasn't originally known when we did the bid documents because we wanted to get it to cure faster than what we anticipated. Otherwise, we would have to close the lane down for multiple days.
But maybe I misread it then, but I thought it was partly because certain sections of Harlem need to be reconstructed.
Well, underneath these areas, the soil is basically collapsing, and we had to go deeper with the base patching and the concrete.
And that was something we didn't know we were putting together.
Correct, right.
And then with regard to this, the one thing that did surprise me on the alley was we do inspect the sewers, right? So wouldn't we have seen the problem with the sewer
Right.
thing?
So we see the sewer lines, but we don't always see the manholes very well, and so that's
you don't
why
individually inspect the manholes, you just use the camera?
we do from time to time. But some manholes we just don't get to. So we check the sewer lines, and then the manholes we don't see everything until we open it up. You know, when we do a reconstruction project.
Okay. I mean, I would have thought you would check the alley out though before, because this is just one alley, right?
Yeah, it's that T alley up there. Off of,
Okay. And then I think that there's a typo in the ordinance because there's a reference to 12,000. I got to find it now, but There's reference to $12,000 and there's another reference to $86,000.
There's a math issue that I was trying to figure out also.
Well, yeah, but I mean, according to the write-up, it was a $12,000 change order, but there's authorization to issue both a $12,000 check and an $86,000 check.
Might be for the, is that for the base amount?
Some of the cost change was what was considered budget and what was actually over.
John, do you,
Well, yeah, I would have to check that. I don't recall that number.
It's
Was the
in
original
section 2.
70?
I know it was under the budgeted amount.
No, I appreciate
so-
that, but I thought the issue before us was a $12,000 change order, but in the ordinance, there's reference also to authorize and direct the village president to execute change order 1 and execute a check in the amount of $82,600. I'm wondering what that's for.
Yeah, the correct amount should have been the 12,000.
Well, why don't we,
Um,
let's do this. Let's just, obviously, if there's a discrepancy, let's just pull
well,
it.
I mean, it may be explainable, I couldn't figure it out.
yeah, look at it. I thought it was the 82,000 that we owed.
Let me see. Let me just read this.
Why would they need authorization, a secondary authorization?
It is because there was a change order.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this,
so that's the amount over the contract award. It looks like the
Right.
12,000.
Right.
correct.
That's
So
what I thought.
I'm wondering about the 86,000.
Budget
The-
was 75.
That's you.
leave
The
it,
bill was going to
because
be
that,
70 and then
That was
Leave
the
that
original.
12.
Was-
over.
I'm sorry.
that's okay. I believe this reflects the revised contract amount.
But we're authorizing a payment of $12,000 and $82,000. That's the part that confuses me. So you already authorized the $70,000 initially when we did the project.
Right.
But this authorizes 12 plus 82. So I know 82 is the total amount
So
now?
it looks like the wording.
Well, no, it would be it would be 12 plus 7. The total amount now is 80.
But
what
it
it's saying
says-
is
82,600.
so the
Go ahead
total
and read it. Read it out loud so everyone
Yeah,
can hear it.
so the president and board of trustees approved change order number 1, the amount of $12,185. They further authorize and direct the village president and clerk to execute the change order, execute the check and other payments to the contractor in an amount not to exceed the amount of $82,600.
I think it reads right.
Okay, we've already authorized. I mean, the part that confused me, we've already authorized the $70,000.
You have, but now this is the belt and suspenders total amount. That
Okay.
I think it.
It's
I
not,
think it
it's
reads
not
right.
a new
Yeah.
82,000. It's include this.
Right.
Correct.
I think it reads right. Okay, so I think that's, Trustee Kurji, any further questions on it? Okay, on a consent agenda that we're not supposed to do? Okay, so I'll go ahead and ask the clerk to please take the vote on,
Can I read
The-
it into the
yes,
record?
please.
Consent agenda item A, special village board meeting minutes, November 12th, 2019. B, waiver of formal bids due to an intergovernmental agreement and approval of a supplemental statement of work with municipal GIS partners for $41,901. D, waiver of formal bids and award of purchase through the Suburban Purchasing Cooperative of a 2020 Ford Utility Police Interceptor AWD vehicle from Curry Motors for $38,500. E, change order number 1 final for the 2019 patching project for $12,185 resolution. F, change order number 1 final for Thomas Street Alley reconstruction for $12,617.27 resolution. H, monthly financial report, October 2019. I, accounts payable, October 2019, $1,914,658.31. J, village administrator's report.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee O'Connell.
Yes.
Trustee Bachner.
Yes.
Trustee Kargi.
Yes.
Trustee Vasquez.
Yes.
Trustee Brennan.
Yes.
Trustee Hennick.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so then if I can get a motion to move on to C in a second, and then we can talk about it.
Okay, I move to approve a waiver of the formal bidding due to the state bid pricing and then the award of a contract to CDS Office Technologies for computer equipment replacement for an amount not to exceed $104,992.
Okay, do I hear second?
Second.
Okay. And you're,
The concern I had with this, I'm not sure why we're not bidding this. It's a discrete, there's a whole bunch of discrete little things we're buying that we could ask every computer provider to give us a price on it. Maybe the CDS is the best price, and I know we've had good experience with them in the past, but this is just buying equipment. So it seems to me that if we can get a better price from someone else because we bid it, that makes more sense. Rather than rather than just saying, okay, well, CDS has been good in the past, so they're good now. there's not that much involved in doing the bidding.
You're using state pricing.
Right, but the other component to this is the state pricing. So typically on something like this, we would go and purchase it off the Illinois Department of Central Management Services bids out a lot of these things, and so we typically the CDS will offer us the state price. They've actually offered us better pricing than
So we wouldn't do better if we bid it out.
So, and to clarify too, not only the state pricing, but then, excuse me, some of the purchasing cooperatives we go to, we check with that. And to your point about other vendors, I do send these part lists to other vendors, but in this case especially, we did not find any other vendors that supplied any or all of or even half the parts. So on a line by line basis, we check part by part. But that's kind of how we justify this. I know it's a little different than what we usually do.
A good question, but yeah, thank you. All right. Hearing no other questions or comments, I'd ask the clerk to read item C and then take the vote.
C, waiver of formal bids due to state bid pricing and award of contract to CDS Office Technologies for computer equipment replacement for an amount not to exceed $104,992. Trustee Bachner.
Yes.
Trustee Kargi.
Yes.
Trustee Vasquez.
Yes.
Trustee Brennan.
Yes.
Trustee Hennick.
Yes.
Trustee O'Connell.
Yes.
Okay. Motion
Okay.
carries.
So for item G, if I can get a motion and a second, and then we can discuss item G.
I move that we approve the appointment of Victor Puskas, Jr. as backup administrative hearing officer.
Second.
All righty. Trustee Buckner?
Yeah, so I just wanted to see if there is a chance, because it looks like here we need somebody just for the month of December. The information that we have on Mr. Puskas seems like a quick and short bio, and I'd have a preference to have more information in appointing a regular backup administrator, law judge for River Forest. So if everybody is in agreement, you may have some more detail that you want to provide, Kathy.
No, I think as we spoke, I mean, this is just for a temporary basis because of the person we have currently is out in December, and we want to have administrative hearings going forward in December. Also, this appointment is the village president's appointment, and then you approve it. So just so there's clarity, it's like commissions, and it's like the village attorney, and so you're right. When we do, and Eric and I chatted about this in terms of any other backup administrative hearing officers, that we should have kind of a list of those, and at that point in time, I would offer that up for approval. But so you have a longer, bio on them. You'd have a little bit more knowledge on them, just like we would do with anybody you all would approve for commissions and for anybody other jobs that you approve my appointments on. We also talked about the current administrative hearing officer, that I would also like to put them on the rotation that we have the village administrator and the village attorney on, and that's a 4-year appointment. Right now, I think they just run.
Yep.
Yeah.
They were
without-
appointed and served. It's still at the board's pleasure.
at the
your pleasure.
board's pleasure. But
Your
we don't have any expiration on that person. So I'd like to come back to you all and have a formal process by which we appoint the administrative officer official for 4 years with an expiration, and then we can always re-up it as we'd like, as well as a list of backup hearing officers as well, so that we would have a fairly knowledgeable idea of who we're using. So this person is just purely as a backup for December, if I correctly understand your point.
I mean, the reality is if the current it's the administrative hearing officer can't be here on for the December hearing, so we've actually deferred a lot of the ongoing cases to January. So, but we still have the parking tickets where people have been noticed. They have to come appear. The alternative then becomes they all show up and we tell them to go home and come to the next hearing. So just from a customer service perspective, we wanted to have someone to hear those cases so we don't have to turn people away. In the event, though, the administrative hearing officer who does these matters and then also the red light camera hearings, if he were to call in sick or something, it would be nice to have someone as a backup in the event the primary person couldn't make it.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. I'd like to have more information before we formally, have someone appointed.
Before you
as
vote
a
on it.
back- Yeah.
Yeah, we understood. As we move forward, as I said, we're going to change a few things on the way the currently works. I think this is just temporarily, and this is my appointment. I think we need to make sure that we have somebody here to hear the like as Administrator Palm mentioned. I think we need somebody here to do the work in December. So I'm in favor of this of Victor doing that role right now for December. That's what that is. Any other questions or comments? All right, so I'm hearing none. I'd ask the clerk to please read out the G and then take the vote.
G, appointment of Victor Puskas Jr. as a backup administrative hearing officer. Trustee Kargi.
Yes.
Trustee Vasquez.
Yes.
Trustee Brennan.
Yes.
Trustee Hennick.
Yes.
Trustee O'Connell.
Yes.
Trustee Bachner.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we're going to move on to item 7, which is the consent items for separate consideration. The first one, if I can get a trustee and a second on 7A, and we then will discuss, if we need to, that item.
I move to approve payment for the Economic Development Fund for $11,141.28, for the Madison Street TIF Fund for $1,636.76, and for the North Avenue TIF Fund for $325.
Second.
Okay, thank you.
And as in the past, since this involves TIF funds, I'm going to recuse myself and ask the clerk not to call my name since my law firm represents both District 200 and District 90.
Okay. Any comments or questions on this item? Hearing none, I'd ask the clerk to please read it and then take a vote.
You need me to read it
out.
again?
Yep, it's a consent.
Okay. Accounts payable from the Economic Development Fund, $11,141.28. Madison Street TIF Fund, $1,636.76, and North Avenue TIF Fund, $325.
Okay.
Trustee Brennan.
Yes.
Trustee Hennick.
Yes.
Trustee O'Connell.
Yes.
Trustee Bachner.
Yes.
Trustee Kargi.
Yes.
Okay, and then the last item for under the consent items for separate consideration is 7B. If I can have a trustee and another second, a trustee move and another second, and then we'll discuss anything if we need to on item 7B.
Move to approve payment from the general fund to McDonald's Carabides for $83.69.
Second.
Okay.
Because my relationship with the franchisee, I'd ask the clerk not call my name, please.
Great.
Trustee Hennick. You
might
want me
just
to read
yeah,
it?
I think you need to.
Accounts payable from the general fund to McDonald's Caravites for $83.69. Trustee Hennick.
Yes.
Trustee Bachner. Trustee.
Yes.
Trustee Kargi.
Yes.
Trustee Vasquez.
Yes.
Trustee Brennan.
Yes.
Okay, very good, thank you. All right, I'm going to ask the village board if you would consider, since we have so many people in our audience, to take up 10A, which is the wildlife management program, and move it up now.
Sure.
I mean, so it gives everyone the ability to go home.
No, just your consensus.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yes.
Okay. So what we're going to do is take the wildlife maintenance issue up now versus an hour from now. Okay, so with that, if everyone's okay, then I would ask, we'll begin the citizens' comment portion of it. And Marta, you're happen to be up on top, so. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Eric. We do have, otherwise, I would never say this, but because we have 14 people on the list that want to talk about this, all I ask is that we be kind of short, concise, and if there's similar things that you want to say, ditto would work, or I emphasize or I echo what the other person said would suffice as well. So I just appreciate that, so we'll get everybody up here on a timely basis. So thank you, Marta.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Marta Kosber, and I have lived in River Forest for 47 years. I reside at 1235 Monroe. Let me start by thanking our trustees and Kathy for their service to our village. I appreciate the time you put in to make make sure our village remains a wonderful place to live. I am an active and respected member of our community and a 23-year art teacher at Lincoln and Willard schools. In all these 47 years, the deer in this village have never been referred to as a problem. Quite the opposite. For us, every family deer sighting was a teaching moment about respecting the wildlife with which we share our space and about understanding and appreciating its incredible diversity. Respectfully, I would ask you to consider postponing a decision on culling the deer in such a barbaric way. Respectfully, I would ask that you remember your campaign promises to represent all the residents of River Forest, not just some of the residents. Can we get a fair and accurate accounting of what all the village residents think? Or are we at the point where some residents are more equal than others? Let me outline 2 ways in which the decision-making process for culling the deer was improper. First, the committee did not conduct adequate due diligence in terms of researching this issue. The village did not collect proper surveys and data as recommended by the IDNR, nor did it look into alternatives to shooting the deer. Before making a decision, the village needs to do its homework. Second, the decision process was not transparent and excluded the voices of many River Forest residents. I hold this view, and so do many of my neighbors. The village had a meeting on June 24th to discuss wildlife nuisance. Those of us who had no grievance did not think this meeting was for us. After all, we chose to live by a forest preserve. Imagine my surprise when I read in the newspaper that River Forest had already finalized decisions to hire sharpshooters to kill the deer. Clearly, the culling decision was made long before there could be public debate. This decision only reflects the opinion of a small minority of deer dislikers. It does not reflect the interest of a majority of River Forest residents like it should. I was hoping that our village was above that kind of governing. Does culling guarantee the deer won't come into people's yards next spring? Will we keep killing until they're eliminated? Respectfully, I would ask that our village board be honest about what this is really about and how this was started, landscaping and deer droppings. Wouldn't it be better for everyone to come to a compromise solution after reviewing all the data that should have been collected, instead of causing such divisions among friends and neighbors? Is divide and conquer the new norm? Again, respectfully, I would like to ask you to consider postponing a decision on killing the deer in Thatcher Woods until you've done all of your homework on this issue and listened to all of your constituents. Isn't there enough violence in our world today? Can we be better than that and come up with a better solution? Thank you.
Thank you, Marta. John? There you go.
I'm going to take the absolute opposite view there. So, my name is John Reger. I'm 7837 Greenfield, and I've been in River Forest for over 20 years now. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I don't have any prepared words, except that I'm going to go off what I've prepared myself. So, I was at that June 24th meeting. It was June 24th, and one of my disappointments, I actually thought it was a good meeting, except we didn't talk about the real issue. If we were just talking about deer droppings or landscaping, I'd be with you 100% of the time. But what I really thought the issue was going to be, because I see it very clearly, is the infectious diseases that are caused by deer ticks. This is very, very serious. So I think it's important to understand what deer ticks cause. They cause Borrelia. They cause Babesia. Babesia is a bacteria. A parasite. Borrelia is a bacteria, which is also known as Lyme disease. These deer. So it's important, before I talk about the deer, but it's important to understand what a tick's life cycle is. So depending on species, ticks can live 2 to 3 years. They absolutely do not reproduce. A female will not reproduce unless she reaches the end of her life cycle. She can't reach the end of her life cycle if she does not have a large size host to reach the end of their life cycle. So that is a deer, that's a coyote, that's a raccoon, or a human being. So what is happening? So those of us who grew up as scouts or grew up camping, we were taught when we go camping, you wear long socks, you wear long sleeves. When you go into the woods, you have to avoid getting tick bites, and you get checked. But that's not what's happening today. What's happening is our deer are in our yards, are in our front yards, in our backyards. They're eating the vegetation. Ticks, what do they do for their life? They go from host to vegetation to host to vegetation, and they eat their way up to the larger host, and then they get to the vegetation. And then guess what? They're in our vegetation of our houses, our yards, our backyards, our front yards, our side yards. Guess who's in those yards? Our children. Our children are playing in those yards. Hide and seek, kickball, whatever it is, football. This is where these children pick up tick bites. I will tell you from a very personal viewpoint, Lyme disease has stolen the childhood of my daughter. Absolutely taken it away. And I know for a fact that other people in this room here and in the village know of people that have experienced anxiety, brain fog, odd pains in their feet and in their legs, but they don't know what. They can't get a clear diagnosis. Well, not in every case, but in many of those cases, there's no question that this individual has Lyme disease. I will tell you from our own personal viewpoint, we've had several families come up to us and say, hey, my child is experiencing very similar symptoms that your daughter has been experiencing for a number of years. What did you do? I said, well, we found that she had Lyme disease. It took us a long time to figure it out. It took us a long time. In every case, 100% of the time, and this is multiple times, their individual child has been diagnosed with Lyme disease. There's no question we have an epidemic. These ticks are everywhere. They go from host to vegetation to host to vegetation. Your children are playing in these vegetations. It's time that we get rid of the deer. It really is time.
Thank you, John.
Yep.
All right. I'd ask Annie to come up. Annie Wallace. There you go. Hi, Annie.
Hi.
You're hiding back there. Couldn't see.
My name's Annie Wallace. I am a much more recent transplant to River Forest from Chicago. I've been here about 5 years. I love the village. We're so delighted to be here, and I thank all of you for the hard work and service that you provide to the village. I wanted to provide my perspective a little bit as someone who doesn't have sort of a lifetime of experience here, and how we chose to come to River Forest in the first place when we were choosing where to move. I think it's such a unique environment because we're near the vibrancy of Oak Park. We're so accessible to the city, and yet we're also adjacent to Thatcher Woods and the Forest Preserve in a very unique way that honestly was so exciting for me to share with my young daughter as we began to experience and see the abundant wildlife in the village. So that's really, I treasure that and really want to preserve that for my child and for my family. I saw that there was that meeting in June, and it was billed as a meeting that spoke to nuisance wildlife, and so I didn't think it was for me because I didn't view the wildlife to be a nuisance. So then, I read the report. There was, the media coverage about the plan, and that really came as a shock to me that it seemed that we were very far down the path of choosing a very drastic, sort of extreme measure to address something that I didn't even perceive to be a problem. So I figured that, if we were that far down the path, that would have been something that I would have known about, that we were in the process of doing. It would have been something that I would have had a say in as a resident of the village. And it would be something that was supported by data that folks had carefully collected over time to determine what the problem was, what the cause of the problem was, and what solutions might be applied that would actually resolve that problem. And that all solutions that were available before we were using our tax dollars to hire sharpshooters to kill deer down the street from my house would have been exhausted, because I view that to be sort of the drastic last resort measure. And honestly, beyond it's sort of an indefinite measure, right? Because you try that once and that's not going to necessarily eradicate the issues that people have raised. And there's not anywhere to go beyond that except to just keep doing it year after year after year until you are at a point where you've eliminated the deer. And perhaps that is the will of some of the people in the village. And I certainly appreciate that there are serious concerns that people have. But none of those things have been borne out in any sort of measurable data collection. We haven't taken a survey of anybody in the village. We haven't done a fulsome analysis of the population of the deer, how it's changed, whether it has changed, whether the behavior of the deer has changed. We haven't taken any of the steps that would logically lead us to this last resort making sense. Not to mention the fact that it's a $200,000 contract over 5 years. We're already paying, as Cook County taxpayers, $1 million a year for deer management in the Forest Preserve District of Cook County. So we all get the pleasure of paying double for introducing sharpshooters to kill deer down the street from my house. It's just sort of anathema to what I thought I was moving to in this village. So those are the concerns that I wanted to express. I think that there are folks here who actually have done some really great work in beginning to try to collect that data. And I would encourage folks to put a hold on taking these steps that will lead us to this inevitable end before we've really done the objective work.
Okay, great. Thank you, Annie. Mary? No, Mary Banker. I'm sorry. Wrong Mary. Sorry. Two Marys.
It's that kind of town. There's a lot of Marys here.
Yeah. A lot of Marys, a lot of Kathys, a lot of people.
Hi, I'm Mary Vanker, 1234 Monroe Avenue, River Forest. So thank you all for your service to our community. I arrived back in town late August 2019, this summer, and ran into a bunch of neighbors and friends in the community that let me know about some newspaper articles and the meeting on June 24th. And they were all upset about it, the idea that we were going to be culling the deer herd. And I decided I wanted to find out more about it and what this was all about. So I did reach out and email Eric Palm. I did review the June 24th IDNR presentation and started doing what I'd say would be some continuation of research. But, early on, my attempt was reaching out to Eric to notify him of a plant nursery that I use that has a lot of deer-resistant plants. I got email response back from Eric and then from Kathy, and I was advised by our village president that deer-eating landscaping would, quote, never be the reason to cull deer in River Forest. I was told that village administration is moving forward to kill deer for health and safety reasons. So I wish to comment briefly on the purported health issues because I believe there is no evidence supporting a decision to kill deer for public health reasons. One issue that was raised is chronic wasting disease. This is a disease in deer and not in humans. And the IDNR has reported that there are 0 instances in Cook County. The main issue seems to be the concern about Lyme disease. I understand that there are a small number of River Forest residents that have contracted Lyme disease, but it is also my understanding that it is not known how or where they did. Killing deer cannot eliminate the risk of Lyme disease, which originates in mice and songbirds and is transmitted by ticks. Any mammal will carry infected ticks, including coyote, fox, skunk, rabbits, raccoons. I'm not aware of any data or evidence that shows the proposed culling of 50 deer in Thatcher Woods will have any material impact on the risk. I also am not aware of any data or evidence that there is a heightened risk of Lyme disease in River Forest. If you want to determine if we are having an epidemic, then why don't you conduct a survey of the residents? One way that we or other communities use to determine the level of Lyme disease or the risk for Lyme disease is through our pets. Our dogs are an early marker for contracting Lyme disease. So your dog will be visiting the vet, they'll be tested, they can be vaccinated. All of these things are actually not being done in River Forest. So if our local pets are not picking up Lyme disease, I doubt the risk is that great for humans. But again, it is something that you can easily query by asking us all. I also wish to point out that in Illinois, it actually ranks quite low nationally in the occurrence of Lyme disease. I do not wish to minimize the potential impact for those who do contract Lyme disease, but we do not have an adequate basis to conclude that we need to start shooting deer. The other thing that is important to say tonight is based upon the information that I have received through FOIA requests. The information shows that the village has not done what is recommended by government agencies and others to evaluate and address deer conflicts in our community. In response to my FOIA request, I have been told that the Forest Preserve has no surveys of deer in Thatcher Woods to establish the size of the herd, any change in the size of the herd, or the impact of the herd. I also learned that in the past, beginning no later than 2015, the Forest Preserves rejected requests by the village administration to cull deer using Forest Preserve funds. The Forest Preserves did not think it necessary and also stated that it usually does not cull deer in a heavily populated area such as ours because of safety concerns. The fact that the Forest Preserve is now willing to kill deer in the woods if the village pays $40,000 a year is not reason enough to do it. Nor is the fact that the IDNR will issue a permit a reason to do it. The fact that the IDNR will not stand in the way is not a recommendation. We also are not following the recommendations of the IDNR. The correspondence I have received shows that at the first meeting with village personnel in April, the IDNR recommended that the village should consider conducting surveys of village residents to gather data and assess community attitudes in order to develop a proper deer management plan with specific quantified objectives, measurable results, and broad community acceptance. The IDNR repeated this recommendation on at least 2 other occasions, both following the June 24th Village Board meeting. The IDNR even provided the village with several examples of surveys other communities have used and offered to work with the village to develop a survey. For some reason, the village has chosen not to follow this recommendation and has chosen to rush forward with the most extreme approach without truly meaningful data, without exploring alternatives, and without assessing community attitudes in the recommended way. We can and should do better than this. The board should defer any decision to kill deer in Thatcher Woods at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Okay, Jerry Humbert?
Hi, Jerry Humbert, 1319 Park Avenue. Thank you all for your service. I live on Park Avenue directly across from Dominican University. I understand that the deer car collisions are predominantly located between Chicago and North Avenue on Thatcher. I have a handout with a map that shows the deer car collisions for the last 5 years in that area. This comes as no surprise to me. Here's my list of concerns as a resident living in this part of town. Number 1, Division and Thatcher is a very busy intersection. There are cars trying to turn right and left from Division onto Thatcher at the same time. It is a dangerous turn, especially left from Division to Thatcher, because you cannot see oncoming traffic from either direction on Thatcher. Greenfield and Thatcher seems to be a less busy intersection, but it is more dangerous intersection during the low light hours and particularly at night because it is literally impossible to see it. Recently, there have been street signs added to help with visibility, but they have made little difference. Because there are no stop signs or traffic signals from Chicago to north on Thatcher, cars routinely drive in excess of the speed limit in that stretch. It's easy to understand why this stretch of road is the hot spot for deer-car collisions. So, will culling the deer suddenly fix this area where deer and cars interact? I believe it is complicated and requires more study. Before we engage in culling the deer, I am requesting caution in our use of taxpayer funds. I believe there might be easier, cheaper options than culling the deer. Please take note of what is happening with our neighbors to the east. Oak Park, with their spending, is literally pricing residents out of a village. They have an entire Facebook page related to their property taxes in Oak Park. I don't think we want that here in River Forest. So that we are not in the same position as Oak Park, I think fiscal stewardship of our tax dollars is warranted because there is no data justification for spending $200,000 of our property tax dollars on this problem when we aren't even sure we have a problem. The numbers show that there was a spike in 2018 of deer car collisions. We are nearly through 2019 and the numbers have now decreased by half compared to 2018 and we're one less than 2017. I have a bar chart that I'm going to hand out to you guys. The deer car collisions are minor in nature. There was only one personal minor injury in 5 years, and the driver in that situation declined medical attention. There's no evidence that culling the deer will reduce the deer car collisions. Deers will still be crossing Thatcher between Division and North Avenue. This is where approximately 50% of the accidents have occurred between 2015 and 2019, a total of 21 collisions in the 5-year span. I would like to remind everyone that the deer are crossing Thatcher to get to the rest of the forest preserve adjacent to Dominican University. This land is always going to be an attractive nuisance for the deer. We should look into extra measures that force driver caution because the deer will continue to cross Thatcher Avenue to get to its land next to Dominican University. I am proposing the following actions. Please extend your traffic study to Thatcher from Chicago to North Avenue to see what traffic calming techniques you can use to help with this stretch of road. It would help everyone if the traffic in this area was calmed. Deer, pedestrians, bicyclists, and drivers. I think a stop sign, deer crossing signs, better lighting, and increased police presence would all help with the traffic calming. Please perform due diligence on the deer problem in River Forest. We need data that justifies spending these tax dollars. According to the most recent data, the deer car collisions are decreasing. It would be prudent to hold on to the taxpayer dollars for the time being before we apply a dubious solution that may not help. And I'd like you to petition the Forest Preserve District of Cook County to cut back the understory on both sides of Thatcher from Division to Greenfield to help with driver visibility so we can all see the deer and other drivers. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Jerry. Okay, very good. Thank you, Jerry. All right, Carrie?
Hi, Carrie Cragen, 914 Bonnie Bray. Wanted to say what I'm thankful for, and it is all of our controlled intersections. I am so happy to have all the new stop signs up. I walked to the library the other day and couldn't believe I could go down Iowa and not have to pause at every intersection and see if a car was coming or not. So thank you. I'm here to talk about the deer. I'm, besides an avid pedestrian, also an avid but very unsuccessful gardener. And it's not always my fault. The birds eat the berries off my trees. The squirrels and chipmunks and critters eat my raspberries and peaches. The skunks dig up my grass looking for grubs. The possums and raccoons pick my cucumbers and cantaloupes in the middle of the night. Pretty much peppers and garlic are all that survive in my family for us to eat. But I also see hawks and foxes and coyotes, and I cheer them on when they prey on all the garden raiders. The last 2 years, after heavy rains, the deer have joined the feast, and they go straight for my tomatoes and only the ripe ones. As I have no fence and no dog, garden security has fallen to me. As an embarrassment to my family, I've chased the deer, I've clapped at the deer, I've sprayed water at the deer, I have cursed the deer. But I've never called the village to report this property damage caused by the deer. The deer go back into the forest as soon as the water recedes, and to be fair, I haven't called the village about the hundreds of other animals in my yard that eat all of my food year round. I haven't called because I recognize if I plant food for me in my yard, I shouldn't be shocked that other animals like to eat that food too. But I'm not here about my garden tonight, and my garden shouldn't be your problem or the village's problem. There's a cheap solution for me, which is mesh fence that I'm going to put up this spring around my tomatoes. And my tomato and deer conflict doesn't require village board action tonight or taxpayer funds. I'm not a fan of the deer, but I am a fan of good governance and of science and data. And I really had a hard time reading the notes on page 177 of the agenda packet that said we're spending $40,000 to kill the deer, and it's not justified with any scientific data. And there seem to be some false claims in the FAQ also. The village statements and proposed solution imply that the deer are eating my tomatoes because there's been some deer population boom in the last 2 years. And thus the logical solution to this increase in deer interactions is to kill the deer. Curiously, neither the village nor the Forest Preserve nor IDNR has any data on the population in Thatcher Woods. No one knows what the historical deer population is, how many deer per acre Thatcher Woods can sustain, or if the current deer population has increased. There's also no data on how quickly the Elmwood Park deer, the Melrose Park deer, the Forest Park deer, the Maywood deer would immigrate to Thatcher Woods after we slaughter all the river forest deer. And seeing as you can bike all the way to Wisconsin from North Avenue along the Des Plaines River Trail, you might want to include badger deer in the mix. While there's no data on deer population or deer migration to justify the killing, there is a lot of data on flooding that could explain why some years, especially the last 2 years, the deer might want to leave the forest and eat my tomatoes. The Forest Preserve describes Thatcher Woods as a remnant floodplain forest with savanna and prairie. This area is one of the only remaining examples of quality floodplain forest left in the northeastern Morainal Division of Illinois. That floodplain is lower than our streets and properties and protects our village from flooding. Given the plethora of publicly available weather and river gauge data, I was shocked when I read the village deer FAQ, specifically question 13, under is the deer population migrating into the residential neighborhood attributable to river flooding? And the village answered no. Although river flooding could disrupt deer habitats, the village has not experienced major flooding in the recent past during this uptick of deer being reported in the residential neighborhood. That's just categorically false. According to the Chicago Tribune, through October of 2019, this has been the wettest year on record for Chicago since 1871. The U.S. Geological Survey has river gauges on the Des Plaines River in river forests that also provide very, very clear indicators of forest flooding. The increased human-deer interactions clearly correlate to the wet weather of the last 2 years. The increase of deer-car collisions from the 2015-16 levels to the 2017-18 levels that were also in the FAQ, that might be explained by the USGS data that shows that Thatcher Woods experienced significant periods of flooding in 2017, 2018, and comparatively little flooding when we had very few accidents in 2015 and 2016, measured by the river height gauge measurement of 10 feet. And at 10 feet, we're flooding in the river. When you get up to 13, at 10 feet, we're flooding in the parking lot at Trailside. When you get up to 13, 95% of the woods is underwater. Those two numbers are important because according to the data from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, during the spring of 2017, 2018, and 2019, the river height was in excess of 10 feet for several weeks while our village experienced heavy rains. When soils are frozen from the long winter or saturated by repeated daily rains, There can be standing water in thick mud for weeks in the forest plain, and we often don't see it because we're up higher, and we don't see it because it's not visible on our streets, which means that even the USGS river gauge data that clearly shows increased flood events, it's still an underestimation of the conditions at Thatcher Wood, which can stay flooded at a level that inundates deer habitat without reaching the level that floods the streets. In conclusion, while there's no data that supports that deer population increases have led to increased deer-human interactions, rain, soil saturation, and river data sets are consistent with the changes in deer-human interactions. Simply put, when it's too wet to move through the forest, the deer come into our yards. When it dries out, they go back. And I have one last data set. In May, you approved the Village of River Forest Comprehensive Plan, whose first two sentences highlight the importance of the village's proximity to environmental features such as the forest preserves and the river, which I think the previous speaker talked about. At the end of the comprehensive plan, there are 133 action items listed to implement the plan. In the Parks and Open Space and Environment section, there are 38 action items outlined, 7 of which specifically deal with the forest preserve coordination. And I haven't seen any draft IGAs for all those action items, yet we have a draft IGA for the deer, which aren't even mentioned. I'm stunned by that. Some of the things that are listed in the as action items are coordination with the forest preserve for sidewalk and trail construction in Thatcher Woods, extensions of the Des Plaines River Bike Trail through the village, more programs and activities to utilize the forest preserve and assisting the forest preserve with sustainability, conservation, and wildlife protection programs. These are all items you approved, and yet the seasonal flood-related migration of deer is our first priority. I just can't believe that $40,000 a year is not going to be spent on advancing any of the other 133 action items that are important to our health, safety, mobility, and quality of our life. And instead, it's going to go to protect my tomatoes. Thank you very much for your service,
thank you.
and happy
Thank you, Carrie.
Thanksgiving.
Okay, thank you. You too. Leslie.
Hi, my name is Leslie Zimmerman. I live at 906 Keystone. We're a block away from the Forest Preserve. We chose this house 30 years ago because of its proximity to the Forest Preserve and because the size of the lot made it very attractive for me. I'm a master gardener, and we have, over the course of 30 years, evolved our yard several different times. We get deer a lot. We get chipmunks a lot. We get a lot of rabbits. Not too many possum and not too many skunk. But we also have dogs, and they tend to help us out a little bit. In the 30 years that we've been there, I think there's maybe been 1 or 2 times that our dogs have come into the house with ticks. And if you treat your dogs with chemicals to keep them from getting mosquito bites and tick bites, then you're able to control it. You're also able to control deer with a lot of different kinds of things. Right now we're fighting a buck who seems to enjoy sharpening his antlers on a pine tree. So we covered it. We covered the entire tree so that he can't get to it. Last spring we had a fawn that was born in our yard, and she was beautiful. And our yard is fenced, so the mother obviously jumped the fence and gave birth, jumped back over the fence and left the fawn there. And my husband and a neighbor were running around up and down the side of the yard where the fence was, opening gates to get the fawn out. And the fawn and the mother have returned, but not to our yard, to our neighbor's yard. The second year we lived here, we had a deer that had been hit by a car, and it tried to jump our fence, and it ended up impaling itself on our fence, and it was horrible. It was a horrible sight, and our young children were just devastated to see something like that. And so we've had deer, and they eat our plants, they go after trees, but they're not as bad as the chipmunks that destroy our brick patio, or the squirrels that dig up everything everywhere, and because of all the water, the bugs that go after things too. So it isn't just the deer that are a nuisance. There's lots of things that are a nuisance. But we would not choose to live anywhere else. My husband says we're getting too old. We can't control all this house, all this yard. And I said it'll be over my dead body if we move. um, we chose to live here because of the environment, because of the schools, because of the proximity to the city, because of the proximity to the airport, all things that we needed at the time 30 years ago. And we've enjoyed living here and hope to see you guys make some serious decisions about why we want to stay. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Leslie. Esco?
Good evening. My name is Oscar Kosbur. I live at 1235 Monroe Avenue in River Forest. I've been here for almost 30 years, 29 years. And again, I would like to thank the Board of Trustees, Kathy, and all of your hard work that you do in governing this city. And so, thank you very much. So, as a long-term resident here in River Forest, some have lived longer, but I'm saying that I live here long. I'm concerned about the possible shooting of deer, and I would like to bring everyone's attention to the fact that there are stated and scientific alternatives to the culling of deer, so that we can manage and coexist with those deer. I have here a plan from the Humane Society of the excuse me, of the United States that I sent to Eric Palm on September 17th and asked that this plan be distributed to the village trustees and to Kathy Aducci. The Humane Society document provides templates for use by communities in preventing and solving conflicts with deer, including landscaping, including the safety issues that we talked about, and including health issues that we talked about in Lyme. There's comprehensive plans, excuse me, in here on how to address all of that without having to kill the deer. Killing the deer may be a last resort if you've got a sick herd. That's not been shown here. As a matter of fact, there is a plan in this document where you can use the deer to kill the ticks for Lyme disease. I urge you to read it all. All of you can get this. It's available upon request. It's on there on the Humane Society's website. So that's an approach to kill it. It's actually very cheap to kill ticks with Lyme disease. On top of that, there are other carriers besides deer for Lyme disease. So, what do we have here? Additionally, the menu of alternatives presented in this plan can be significantly less expensive, less risky, and less controversial. As you can see, there's a lot of controversy brewing about this thing here. Than spending $200,000. Think of that, folks. $200,000 that can go to something that's useful, a lot more useful, that was identified in a plan that was presented by the trustees, than only killing the herd option. So think about that. Also, I realized that putting together a plan of controlling the deer, working with deer, coexisting with deer, can be a time-consuming event for the board. Well, the beauty of this document is that it provides you the templates, it provides you a road plan, it provides all the surveys that are recommended by various different agencies, it provides the biological background of deer, provides the road. We talked about the road issues. It provides plans on how issues have been solved by road mitigation plans in other communities. One of the suggestions in this plan is to set up a community task force committee comprised of residents across all attitudes. So take people from both sides of the table, bring them together, have them work together on a plan, utilizing some of the ideas here, utilizing some of the thoughts and information that was presented to you earlier today. We have heard the goal that the thought is to reduce the number of deer by killing them off by a targeted staged massacre in the woods. Unfortunately, deer biology is such that unless you completely eliminate, and that means getting rid of all of them, the deer will keep coming back, perpetuating a problem for a small number of people within the village. The deer, and also all of that is described in this document. Again, I urge you to read this. The deer biology is such that if there's less food, they reproduce less. If there's more food for them, which happen by culling, they're going to have 2 or 3 fawns instead of 0 to 1. So you're going to have the same problem coming over and over and over and over again. You'll have to shoot them. $40,000 a year in perpetuity. Think about that. What can $40,000 a year do to help with other village issues? Regarding data-driven direct decisions, somebody mentioned data-driven. As a trained biologist myself, working for a company that does clinical trials on new therapies, I can tell you that data-driven decisions are paramount to the safety of the people taking the new drugs, and no anecdotal evidence is ever allowed by the FDA or any worldwide governmental agency to be used in their decision making as to whether a drug or a therapy or a device is approved. The same thing should hold true with the village here. You need data, and we don't have that data. We haven't been presented that. We've done some work. My colleagues and I have done some work on that. You're welcome to it, but it's not enough to have some anecdotal evidence that most of which may not be true. So I ask again that you gather and review sufficient data, survey the community for attitudes, and develop a logical plan as recommended by the Humane Society and others, including the IDNR, the people that were here in June. So this means holding off before making a rash decision here that may not be popular with most village residents. So I thank you for your time. I wish everybody a very happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. That was good. Mary. No.
I'm Mary Shoemaker, live at 633 Keystone. I was at the June hearing. I thank all of you for all your time on this. I know it's a sensitive issue. I know it's not an easy issue. I'm coming as just a homeowner. There have been times when I've had, and I'm not exaggerating, over a dozen deer in our yard. This is, I don't know if it's just, something about Keystone or what, but I mean, there have been so many deer in Keystone. I know Blondie has had a lot of deer in her front yard. We see them all the time. It's a problem. There has to be something done. I don't know what the answer is, but we have to do something. I'm not one to say that we shouldn't have any deer. We've lived here over 20 years, and the numbers of deer have increased so greatly that it's to the point where now I don't even like, for instance, in the evenings to go out into my yard because I'm scared to death that there's going to be a deer in our backyard. I guess I have to put up a fence to take care of them. That doesn't make me happy because one of the things I love about River Forest is the openness, not having to have everybody fenced in. But if I have to, I guess maybe that's one of the alternatives. I think that's a sad alternative. I think the other thing that everybody needs to really take to consideration is the gentleman that talked earlier who has a child that has Lyme disease. I'm not a biologist, I'm not a medical doctor, but I do, if that was my child, I'd be very, very concerned too. I mean, I think that's something that the public safety and health is something we have to take into consideration, and I think something has to be done.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Okay, Dave.
Hi, Dave Franick, 633 Keystone. As my wife Mary's indicated, we've lived here now for 20 years, and we've noticed over the last 5 to 7 years that the deer problem has actually gotten exponentially worse. We've seen as many as a dozen deer on our property. Deer are supposed to be nocturnal, and they're supposed to, if you read all the biologist reports, they're supposed to be most prevalent between dusk and dawn. Well, actually, I've chased a buck out of our yard in the noon hour, now that I'm retired. We had a buck attend our block party in September in the middle of the afternoon. The simple fact is that there's an overpopulation of deer. We don't notice an increase in deer in our yard or in the neighborhood. We don't notice any correlation with the presence of deer in flooding or 2 or 3 weeks after flooding. It's an ongoing issue. It's not something where they're driven out. The problem is their population has really exceeded the resources. If deer have their druthers, yeah, they're going to eat vegetation. They're also going to eat the mass. They're going to eat the acorns that exist in the other nuts in Thatcher Woods. The problem is there's just too darn many deer. What they've done is they've exceeded the natural population. So they're going where we are, and they're going during the daytime where they shouldn't be. They'll eat anything. We have talked to numerous nurseries. I've gotten online and checked the DNR reports from a number of states. If they're hungry enough, deer will eat anything. Deer eat our rose canes. I can't think of anything that would be less appetizing than that. We're not looking for eradication. I'm not coming here with a lengthy prepared statement and inflammatory comments. We're seeking simply a reasonable control of the deer population. It's exceeded that which is naturally prevalent in the area. As one of the earlier speakers said, there's also a public health and safety concern here. And whether it's one child or 6 children, any of us, I think that's frankly more important as to whether or not 10 or 15 deer a year are removed from the area. Because after all, public health and safety trumps everything. And it's a very real concern. And I would not want to stand here, and I wouldn't want to tell the parent of a child, oh, gee, you happen to be an outlier. That's too bad. You live near a forest preserve. There has to be something done to diminish this problem. It's a real problem. It's only gotten worse. It's only going to get worse. And it is not, in my opinion, correlative to any flooding issues. It's simply the population has exceeded the sustainable food supply. So they're coming where they can find it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. Jim?
Hi, everyone. I will join the chorus and thank you for your service to the village. We all are deeply in your debt. So, in any event, and I don't mean taxes, I'm 1210 Franklin. It's where I live. It's about 0.4 of a mile from Thatcher Woods, and on the other side of the block from where Jerry Humbert lives, where we're right up against Dominican. So we're certainly familiar with deer. They are regular visitors, and frankly, we love it. We absolutely love it. And I think that it is part of the special character of the village that we are a place where this close to the city, on the Green Line, you can see deer, coyote, raccoons, skunks, opossums, whatever, hawks. You can go on and on. But that's an amazing part of the character of this village. And I think what you've heard today from a number of people basically is not only is it part of the character of the village, but before we start taking steps to start shooting the deer, thinking that that's going to solve our problems, we really need to assess the data behind what are those problems. Are they really problems? Do the villagers as a whole view them as problems? What is the population? Has it gone up? Is it related to flooding? These are all important questions, and I think that they need to be answered before entering into an IGA to kill them. I just don't think that's going to do any good. I mean, the numbers are going to come right back. You'll have to kill them again. Obviously, Lyme disease is a horrible thing, and the deer tick have the unfortunate fact of being named deer ticks, but they hang out on mammals. And unless we're going to go after the bunnies and the raccoons and everything else, the problem's still going to be there. They're still going to be in our yards. They're still going to be spreading ticks to the extent that they do to the vegetation, and that will be a risk. But that is not the deer's fault, and it's not something that culling the deer is really going to address. The ticks will find other ways, other hosts, and they will be there. So anyway, I just ask you to reconsider or consider carefully before entering into this IGA, and I think it really isn't a very good idea. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. Paul and Debbie, going to come up together? Or... Paul? Frederick? Is that Paul? Oh, they may have left. Yeah, I saw them leave. Okay. We'll take them out. Jacqueline and Matthew? Okay. Hi, Jacqueline.
Jacqueline Stam, 400 Edgewood. I don't really have much to say. I came to gather information, honestly, on this. After I saw the articles, I was honestly appalled by it. I'm against any culling of any sort. I'm a lifelong resident of River Forest, and I think, you know, to make it short and sweet, what other people said, and echo that, you know, that's the beauty of River Forest. They're in my yard all the time. I run to the window to see them. I love them so much, and it just breaks my heart to hear that we might be killing them. And, you know, like I said, you know, you kill one, you have to kill them all. They're not the only host. Obviously, we already heard all this information, but, you know, then what is it? You're going to have to kill all the animals in the forest? You know, we moved to a river forest, okay? And that is where animals live, and we should let them be. And I feel for the gentleman that spoke about his child, but, you know, they were there for a long time before many of us. So I think we need to consider this and find data that backs this before doing anything of the sort. Okay. And basically, that's all I have to say on it.
Thank you, Jacqueline.
Thank you.
Okay. Jan? Nothing? Okay. Anybody else? I know Gigi that wanted to speak. Do you want to speak, Gigi, or do you want to speak now? And then I will take you. Okay. And then you. Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Friends, neighbors, trustees, thank you. This has been extremely valuable and informative, the debate, the discussions. I guess as hearing all of this information tonight, I watched the video from the June 24th meeting. That meeting did seem to say that guns were not going to be used. They were going to be bows and arrows, which is more humane. So I have some questions. I'm in favor of culling the deer. Make no mistake about it, and I'll tell you why. But I do think that there are some valid concerns about how it's done and the data and the research. But the bottom line is the deer are overpopulated, and perhaps that's based on a lot of anecdotal evidence. Like those of us who've lived here for 20 or more years, like myself, we know that there are a lot more deer now than there were 20 years ago. But mostly I would like to echo John Rager's statements. John has a daughter with Lyme disease. I have 2 children who were diagnosed with Lyme disease. We do not camp. If you know me, I'm not camping, okay? We do not hike. My children have not been Boy Scouts. We vacation in places that are not known to have Lyme disease. And if you look at the research, Lyme disease has spread across this country from the East Coast. It has made its way into Michigan, Illinois, and Wisconsin. And I don't have the chart with me tonight, but I'd be happy to forward it to the board. This is a hotspot exactly right here in Illinois, the western suburbs. My stepson was at college at U of I, and he was calling me. It was the beginning of the year, and he was calling me saying, I think I have food poisoning, but it's been going on for weeks. I'm throwing up every morning. And I said, that's crazy. Were you out last night? No. He had to drop out that semester. We brought him home at, great, we're talking about expenses, possible, taxpayer money. This kid had every test the doctors could think to give him. Well, is it lupus? Is it mono? Let's put him under anesthesia. We'll give him a scope. Perhaps he has esophageal cancer. What is going on with this kid? And he was sleeping 16 hours a day. Well, they found nothing wrong. This went on like this. He went back to school. His grades are terrible. He's not going to classes. He's so exhausted all the time. They gave him, various medications to try to fix the problem. The problem wasn't fixed. Finally, my friends, the Ragers, convinced me, well, get him a Lyme test. And I said, but, and they said, no, because we think our daughter got it here in River Forest. We finally got him a Lyme test a year into this. And in fact, he had Lyme. Okay. This kid's life has been derailed by this disease. At that time, I then said, my God, and I shame on me, I felt awful that we hadn't thought of that, knowing what the Ragers had been through. I had my entire family tested and my dog, and my 9-year-old, he was 7 at the time, also tested positive for Lyme disease. There is no other explanation but that both boys contracted it in our yard, or perhaps in Thatcher Woods itself, where Chicago Edge has soccer practice. So now my stepson has done a lot of treatments, very expensive treatments, most not covered by medical insurance. He is still not back in college. He's feeling better, so thank God for that. That's a blessing this Thanksgiving for our family. This is a very, very serious disease. We can debate for hours. And sir, I'm sorry, but you were pretty disrespectful when John talked about ticks carrying Lyme disease. We can debate for hours how it's transmitted and whether it's the deer, whether it's bunnies. The deer are the biggest animals. It makes sense to me that they're going to have 50 ticks on their body. A bunny might have 1 or 2, or, the bigger the animal, the more ticks there are. In Europe, there is research to show it's even mosquitoes who are biting deer and transmitting it to humans that way. Our scientists in the United States have not accepted that research as being properly vetted, but perhaps that's where we're going. If you know about this disease, you know that it is on the rise. And maybe that's because more medical professionals are becoming aware of it. But I wouldn't wish my son's stories on anyone. And I think we need to do everything we can to prevent an outbreak even more serious than we already have. This is 3 children that you're hearing tonight that have Lyme disease that their parents believe they caught here at home in their backyards in Thatcher Woods. I know of 2 dogs in River Forest who have had Lyme disease. So perhaps we do need more data. If that would help people be comfortable with this idea, I would love for the village to ask the residents what their experience is with Lyme disease. Have you had it? Has your dog been diagnosed with Lyme disease? And no one will ever know where they contracted it.
Right.
There's no way to prove it.
Right.
But where do you suspect you contracted it? Well, maybe some people know. I went hiking in Connecticut, the typical story, and yeah, I had the bullseye rash. You don't always have to present with those symptoms. You don't have to have the bullseye rash and the flu-like symptoms. My sons didn't. I do want to let you know my now 9-year-old son got the antibiotics, and he had been presenting. He had strep throat 6 times that year, which is something that correlates with Lyme. He had his tonsils out. Again, the pain to my poor son having to go through all these treatments, the cost to our family emotionally, financially, but he's doing great. And my older stepson is hopefully on the mend. But this is an incurable, lifelong illness. The Rager's daughter will have to, and my stepson, have treatments and watch for symptoms for the rest of their lives. So, Village Board, thank you. Perhaps there is a way to satisfy the residents' concerns, and perhaps more data is needed. I would ask that you survey the village about exposure to Lyme, or people who've been diagnosed with Lyme, animals that have been diagnosed with Lyme. But ultimately, we should thin the deer population to prevent any more cases like our children have experienced. Thank you.
Thank you, Gigi. Okay, if you don't mind coming to the podium and just telling us your name for the record.
So thank you for the opportunity to comment. I apologize. I didn't know there was a sign-up
No,
sheet.
no worries. I
My
understand.
name is Ryan Tetrick. I live at 562 Keystone. I'm a relatively new resident here, and I'm a little bit embarrassed in this room to say it. When a couple of years ago, when my wife and I started looking for houses, we were living in the city. River Forest was not on our radar. I grew up in the western suburbs. I didn't even know where River Forest was. And then we started looking at real estate listings in Oak Park, and then we saw these listings a little bit further out. And sure enough, there was a town, River Forest, that had a forest with a river in it. And we went to see this house, and we drove past, this quaint train station with this grassy field. And we turned down Keystone Avenue and went to see this house, and we walked in. The realtor walked us through the back of the house, and we looked out this beautiful art glass window, and I kid you not, 3 feet away, this gorgeous buck lifted its head, framed by this beautiful art glass window. You got to hand it to the real estate agent who planned all that out. And of course, we bought the house and we moved here, and it's a wonderful town, and so evidenced by the people who are bringing so much seriousness to this issue. I don't have a lot of the great data and supporting evidence, but I can tell you that what makes this town a place that you want to move to, what sets it apart from other places, is that you're on the doorstep of Chicago, but you get to live in nature. And I really wonder, as you tear up the field and put AstroTurf on it, as you shoot the deer in the head, or wherever you're going to shoot them, if you know what makes this town special and what's attracting young families to live here. And it's the ability to live with all this nature. I have a 4-year-old daughter and a 1-year-old daughter. We are excited to bring the deer into our yard. If we could have brought more deer to our block party, we would have. I would be feeding them to bring them to our yard. I think it is a huge mistake what you're doing, and I think that you're destroying what makes this town special by taking these sorts of actions that sort of degrade what makes this a really unique place to live. And I really wonder how much you really appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, I'm David Reno Ogden at 559 Edgewood Place. And I don't know if I'm for or against, but I have too seen a lot of increased deer. I've been here coming up on 20 years. And what little common sense I have tells me that, or I do know with some research that it takes 5 acres of a healthy forest to support 1 healthy deer, but it can take, I think I read 1 acre of gardens that we plant can support 10 to 20 deer. So we've got this mismatch of a limited amount of forest in River Forest, and there's no natural predator for the deer, and we're feeding the deer left and right. So it's going to come to a head at some point. There was a wonderful, I do spend a lot of time out west, and in Yellowstone Park, they eliminated the wolf, and that ruined the ecosystem beyond belief. The fishing was down, the bug population was down, the birds were suffering, brought the wolf back against, of course, many ranchers' desires, and everything straightened up again. The fishing came back, the shading of the banks came back, the bugs came back, all kinds of wildlife. So it is an important part of an ecosystem that we're tampering with here, with having no natural predators here for the deer. Whether man becomes a predator or not, I'm not sure if that's the answer or not. That report with some of their other solutions certainly looked interesting. So I just want to get that out there, that common sense tells me it's going to be a problem at some point, and we've got to deal with it one way or another. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you, David. Anyone else that didn't sign in I'd be happy to. Okay, very good. Then I will close the public comment regarding item 10A. Now will be our time to kind of discuss this issue and amongst ourselves, and then take a vote on what our next steps will be. So before we do that, I need to have a trustee move so we can discuss it, and second it, and then we'll move on to discussion. So if I can have a trustee give me a.
I'll make a motion to approve the intergovernmental agreement with the Forest Preserve District of Cook County regarding a wildlife management program.
Okay. And here's second.
I'll second.
Okay. All right. All right. So now we are able to discuss this topic. I think the best thing to start before we talk amongst ourselves, unless anyone disagrees here, is to ask either John or Eric, because there's a lot of discussion, and I want to assure everyone, both those that are here tonight and those that came on June 24th and those that read the newsletter and those that read all the presentations and saw all the videos and whatever. I mean, there was a lot of information out, Facebook pages and so forth that we put out. But I think it's important that we've synthesized it down to a discussion of what got us here, right? But more importantly, the work that the administration and the staff did to get us to this point. Because I know John and you have met on many occasions with the Forest Preserve. I know we've had a presentation with IDNR. I know that we talked about surveys and what that means. And I think what happened, it probably didn't get out, and or it was misunderstood, or we didn't explain it right. So let's start there, if you all don't mind, and so we can just get kind of a level playing field, and then we'll take it from there in terms of questions and issues and comments that you all want to make.
Okay. I will try my best to do that for you this evening. So, backing up in time, a lot of this originated, like many items in the community do. There was some outreach from some residents that expressed concern about the deer population and asked us to take a look at it, and that's how this all began. As we've explained in the past, as we evaluate whether to enter into this agreement or not, there is nowhere within the village limits where the village could enter into its own program, right? So we don't have a municipal golf course, or where, then that's typically where a lot of these things will happen up in the North Shore. And so we rely on our partners, in this case the Forest Preserve District, that if in the event we wanted to engage in such a program, a deer management program, we would need their assistance, because anything that would take place on their property within the Cook County Forest Preserves along the banks of the river. And so we have had conversations with the county about engaging in such a program, and such an intergovernmental agreement is before you tonight. And so when they've done their evaluation, they have done it and determined through their survey, and the survey, and this is an area where I think there has been maybe some confusion, and if I have perpetuated that, I certainly apologize. But the survey is of the natural ecological landscape of the existing forest preserves. So it isn't a head count on the deer, right? It's the Forest Preserve professionals, and they have a team of wildlife management staff that they have worked there for many, many years, in some cases almost 30 years, who survey the forest reserves and determine, based on what they're seeing in the ecology, in the environment, whether or not they believe a deer management program would be would be possible, right? And so they're looking at it and reporting back to us and saying, based on what we see out in our property, we believe culling the deer is something that we would support doing, because we don't think the current environment supports the amount of. I think similar to what Mr. Reno Ogden had mentioned before, that there's an imbalance, if you will, between the amount of deer and what the forest reserve can ultimately support. And so that is how the Forest Reserve looks at this in terms of making a determination on whether or not to go forward with a permit through the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, of which they are doing. So the agreement is to financially support that, but the means by which they are making that determination is based on what's going on in their property to go ahead and move forward. At the same time, we've had reports that continue to come in regarding incidents within the village in terms of traffic, etc. They're not zeroed in on that necessarily as we are. So we're looking at it really from two different prisms, right? The Forest Reserve is looking at their property. We're looking at it from the perspective of the public health and the public safety. And so those are the areas we are zeroed in on. One of the things that has also come up is in terms of data. I agree that in terms of the traffic data, we want to continue to evolve in that area. One of the areas the village doesn't have, has, but is continuing to work on, is how we try to memorialize those incidents. So even last Thursday night, there were 2 incidents with deer and vehicles. One of them was reported, and the second one was not. It just happens that the public works crew that was called in on overtime on Thursday night to pick up the first deer then learned about the second deer. What I'm trying to say is the incidents that we do get, we're going to make sure we do a better job of cataloging and reporting that data. But there are a lot of instances, much like that second one, had we not been out there for the first one, I don't know. Eventually, we probably would have learned about it because there was a deceased deer in the roadway. But ultimately, we haven't always cataloged that from our perspective. So that's what we're starting to do on a going forward basis. John, I'm sure I've lived. And John, I want to commend John. Wherever you are in this particular issue, John has certainly done a lot of work and research for the village, and I know he's become a resident deer expert. So I'll let John jump in as well.
Just to take it from there on the topic of the traffic reports, what you see in the FAQ and has been cited tonight only represents cases in which an Illinois crash report has been reported and filed. In other words, these are instances where a driver has struck a deer, they have called the police department, and an IDOT crash report has been filed that says this was a deer versus vehicle incident. Those are really the only ones that we can be 100% sure of, and in being fair with the data, those are the ones that we've decided to include in these reports. Now, we know that there are many more incidents. These are the ones where, like Thursday night, Eric's talking about, one was reported. That driver did call, stayed on scene, spoke with our officers, provided the information needed to complete the report. The second one, where it is unfortunately a deceased deer in a traffic lane, is not included because there was no driver on scene. In other words, I think reasonable people could assume that this was a deer versus vehicle accident, but because our officers were not able to talk to a driver and confirm that, that does not then generate the Illinois traffic report and is not included in this data. Going forward, as we've discussed on a couple of different occasions, we're working on adding a new code to our CAD system to better count all interactions with our police department and our public works department with deer. But unfortunately, this is the data that we have so far. I just want to make sure that everybody's an understanding on what that data represents. It's only the ones reported. Another note that I wanted to mention too is on the confusion of the survey language. So to be clear, when the project first started, which was really back in March when there was complaints made at a board meeting, and that eventually led to the meeting in June. Survey did mean surveying of village residents, and the reason why that definition changed to what Eric described in a survey of the land is because of who was applying for that permit. When it was the villages, if it's a municipality applying, for example, on a golf course or on their own property, it is typically done through surveying of residents and their complaints and things like that, because that's the data that's supporting the decision. The data supporting the decision by the Forest Preserve is much more similar to that of a farmer, if you could imagine other parts in the state of Illinois, where it's about the impact the deer have on their land. A couple notes too that I wanted to mention on fences. So in the FAQ, you'll see the IDNR's recommendation that any fence that's just a plain fence, in other words, one that's not electrified, they recommend to be at least 8 feet tall. And in some cases where a deer really might want to get into the yard, at least 2 feet deep. Now, in some home cases here, the 2 feet deep might not be necessary. The deer would keep moving along, but the reality is that if they really want to get in there, they are known to crawl under, dig under fences to get under there. The 8-foot reason is because that's what's meant to be tall enough to keep deer out, but also tall enough that they won't be able to try to jump it and get caught on fences. That's probably the next most common occurrence that we have in the village here is deer that either try to go through or over fences and are either stuck or impaled in them, which obviously is a very unfortunate situation for lots of people involved, and usually has to require our police department and public works department in assisting to remove those deer. Be happy to answer any more questions, but I'll stop there, I think.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to open it up to the trustees. I thought it's just a good place to start. Maybe it's repetitive information that John and Eric gave, but I thought it was a good place to kind of synthesize some of the information that we've all heard, since March. So I'll go ahead and open it up.
Yeah. I want to thank the residents for your time and attention to this. We've heard so much new information, old information, some conflicting information tonight, and a lot of emotions too. And I have read and heard about communities that have been torn on the issue of deer and that have created, animosity, and people have lost friendships. And that is not what we want. That is not who we are. So I am in favor of gathering more information, whether that is in the form of a survey of our residents, because our residents are the one who are going to be paying for it. There are several different things that are happening here. There's a lot of information floating around. One is the survey in the Forest Preserve. I've never seen that. I'd love to see it. But that's for them. For us, if we're going to be footing the bill, both financially and emotionally, I think we need to dig deeper into this. And I liked the idea of Kathy, you're going to shoot me about this, but
Don't use that word, for God's sake.
I like the idea of a community. They're going to call me community task force. We've done it we did it for the bike path plan, which is a much easier thing to get our arms around. I think what we've heard from both sides of the argument tonight is that people do want the data.
Well, and that's what I wanted. So I do think there's some misinformation going on here, and I'm just trying to figure out where we're missing it, because who would ever make a decision without data, right? But excuse me, I never made a decision without data. Have you guys? I don't think anybody would say that. I think we need to address this. I mean, by the way, we're all residents. We're all, people that want to do good for the community. I mean, we don't get paid. We do this because we want to give back to the community. We want to do what's right. I know that's me, and I know everyone around this table, that's how they feel. We don't run so we can make life miserable here. We run so we can make life well. And, I get it's emotional. I mean, this is not believe me, we've had a bigger issue several years ago that was much greater in emotion. And we got through that. and we got through it really well. And I am confident that we're going to all get through this too. I really am. Give us time, if you don't mind, and give us a chance to kind of talk through it and represent, like you said, represent all the residents of River Forest. And some are not here, some are watching us over video. But let us give us a chance to get through this and talk through this. So what I'm trying to figure out is exactly what Katie just said and what some of the other residents said is about data. And I don't want to walk away thinking, oh, we're going to, have a survey out there and counting deer or ask residents, well, how many deer did you see today? And how many deer do you like to see gone? I want to set the right expectations. And I think there's something missing here, Eric. So I'm going to ask you one more time.
Sure.
From the professional that we use, and that's the Forest Preserve and the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, are they suggesting that we do a survey of the deer in the Forest Preserve, or is that what you're asking us? How many are out there, and how can we? I think there's some.
No, I've got so many questions.
Oh, but I mean, I want to about the survey though. I mean, survey of the residents.
No, what I was meaning was there was reference to a Forest Preserve survey of the flora.
Right. Right.
That seemed, and apparently the report is that there's damage from the deer in the Forest Preserve, and I've never seen that survey. I've never seen the results of that.
And so,
yeah. Okay.
And so that information has been obtained by the Forest Preserve District, and that information has been verbally related back to the village staff. We do not have a copy of that report.
Okay.
So maybe some more information, some more fulsome information there would be helpful.
So what do you believe is in that report that we don't have, or do you don't know at all?
Well, I don't know. I can't speak to it in specificity because I haven't seen it. What I'm saying is based on what the Forest Preserve has related back to us and their just level of professional expertise in managing the Forest Preserve District, they believe there is enough data that supports going to get a permit from the Illinois Department of Natural Resources based on what they're seeing, and the IDNR, based on that, has told them that they would grant that permit. Is that correct?
Eric, this data set, is it specific to the River Forest area, or is it the Forest Preserve general?
My understanding is to River Forest.
That's correct.
So why hasn't the Forest...
Hang on. Let John just answer that.
Oh, sorry,
just
John.
So,
Didn't realize you were talking.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's correct. So it's the three Forest Preserve properties as they divide them.
And so just so I understand, they're not counting deer. They're just saying that based on the damage to the Forest Preserve, it's their surmise that they're an overpopulation of deer. Is that sort of the logical process? So they're not counting deer and they're saying, okay, this area will support 100, but you got 200. What they're saying is, given the level of damage to the Forest Preserve, it suggests to them that there's too many deer.
That's correct.
Okay, and I'm going to take it to the next level. Are they also, though, saying that culling is the way to resolve that problem?
Yes.
Yes.
They are.
That,
so they're saying whatever these other options are, culling is the way to go.
Yes. To reduce the population to a state that the ecology of that area can handle. That's correct.
So then I'll further your comment or your question and ask, then why hasn't the Forest Preserve included River Forest in its culling program to date? Because it does have a culling program, and we've asked them year after year, apparently, if they would include us, and they have never prioritized us. So why all of a sudden?
That's correct.
Because it's on our dime?
I think it's because we're paying for it.
Yeah.
Well, but I also think we've asked for it, but I think this is the first time because it was such a heightened, because the growth appeared to be, I mean, we've heard it. I mean, we just see more and more and more deer. And I think what was happening is, I don't know this, but I think because we kept on asking the Forest Preserve, hey, how about River Forest? How about River Forest? And I think they finally started talking to us. I don't know. That's got to be one of the reasons.
I mean, based on the feedback from the residents that we received, and at the last meeting, we went back to the Forest Preserve District and said, here, there's been concerns expressed. We would like to revisit this program, and they have come back and said, yeah, we would be willing to partner with you, but you would have to, and obviously that's why the intergovernmental agreement is in front of you, because you would have to then pay for that cost.
I just wanted to jump in there and to note the fact that I think that part of it is related to their budgetary constraints and obviously their vast amount of land. I think parts of it are also related to the amounts that they invest in some of those properties, protecting some of those investments. So areas that were completely destroyed by other things, related to whether it be fires or other invasive species or something like that, that they've then invested dollars into rehabilitating those properties and then doubly protecting their investment by making sure that they're not destroyed by overpopulations of animals. And then the also thing that I wanted to note is that although it's not the financial one that obviously the village is being asked to contribute, they do have skin in the game, if you will, in terms of heading up the whole program. They deal with the contractors, which is numerous throughout the process. They work with the IDNR to get the permits. They do all the reporting, things like that. So there are some contributions that they're making to the program. And I know it's not a direct cost share, but I just wanted to make sure that was recognized.
And Eric, just to close the circle on this,
Yep.
This survey is the sort of survey that the Department of Natural Resources was talking about in those emails that were mentioned. Is that correct?
The ecological survey?
I don't know. There was some mention that there was.
I don't think so.
I'm sorry?
I don't
Right.
think that's
Right.
correct.
No. No, I
Yeah.
think there was references from people saying
Yeah. I hadn't seen the
there was a
emails, so I
FOIA
don't-
response, and there were emails in there that indicated that somehow the Forest Preserve was not agreeing that this was
Yeah.
necessary. I mean,
That's what Mary was saying.
That's what I heard.
So the survey that I think you're talking about that the IDNR is recommending is a survey of residents in an area. Typically, that they're recommending that because that's the justification for a municipality to make an application for a permit.
So that's an interesting distinction that I think ought to be. I just want to make sure because I didn't get the distinction until just recently, and the distinction is the survey of residents is if the applicant, which would be the municipality, wanted to do it on some private land, right,
Or its own.
or its own land.
Correct.
They recommend surveying the residents. If we don't have that, which we don't have private land, and we don't have any massive land that we would ever do this culling. The alternative is to ask the Forest Preserve to be the applicant. And in that case, the Forest Preserve being the applicant, they don't recommend, or they didn't recommend. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm
Nope,
just trying to understand
That's
it.
correct. Again, I apologize for the confusion. I understand. I think it comes from the fact that they're the same word.
The same word.
The survey that the IDNR is talking about for a municipality making an application is a questionnaire, intake tool, a Survey Monkey survey, as opposed to the survey that the Forest Preserve would make, which is a evaluation of their property, taking stock of what is out there. I hope that clarifies.
Do we have something from someone saying that based on our experience and blah, 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 we do believe that culling 50 a year will address the problem?
Well, in part, you have the intergovernmental agreement, which speaks to that just in general terms that they're willing to commit to work on it to get to that number. I mean, here, and I think a couple things have been raised tonight too. I mean, the goal of the agreement is not to eliminate the deer population in its entirety in River Forest. It's to bring it down to a level where there's that balance between the ecology and the deer population. And yes, that's something that we'll have to work on over a several-year period. And it's not going to eliminate things like Lyme disease. It's not going to eliminate things like traffic crashes, but the intended effect of that is to help reduce those items.
Sir, I would call on you, but we're in now a discussion. The comment for is.
Basically, ask one real question.
No, not really. I, if you don't mind, because otherwise, then I'd have to open it up to everybody. And I just think if you don't mind, let us discuss, and then afterward discussion, I'll be happy to call on you. I really would. Just let us kind of talk through this.
I think my question really would answer something really, really fast.
All right, go ahead.
So, having a contract with the Forest Preserve to eliminate deer in the Forest Preserve, correct? Or are they coming into our village to eliminate?
No.
No.
Are they eliminating from the Forest Preserve in hopes that the deer in the village go back to the woods?
Yeah.
That's my question.
Okay, and we're going to answer that because that's what we're talking about right now. Is to try to. It's actually to reduce the total deer population. So,
yes.
Where we go ahead.
I don't know. I think.
No, not answer. I'm just saying, just to finish your thought. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, my thoughts finished for the time being. So,
Oh,
so if anyone else has a question, we'll jump back.
Okay, fair enough.
Can I just
a comment and a question, and I meant to do it to start
And then
with this, but
Patty.
sorry, but I do find it unfortunate. I've been doing this now for 12 years, 6 in the Park Ford, 6 here, and it seems that whenever there's a contentious issue, opponents have to vilify each other. I don't know why. I get so many emails about deer killers.
I
And I
know.
think it's just people that don't want their kids to get Lyme disease or don't want their vegetation. They may not be a legitimate reason for you to agree with this, but it is for them, and they're entitled to this representation. So I think it's really patently unfair to ascribe evil motives to those people that don't agree with you. And I just think it's unfortunate that we always get there. We get there on every issue that there's disputes about. And I just don't understand it. We're all adults. We're all intelligent people. We can communicate in a way where we're being disagreeable. We're disagreeing without being disagreeable. And I would ask it in the future, kind of consider that.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom. I do think it's important. Okay, Patty.
Okay. I have a number of thoughts, so if you can bear with me here. When the conversation started this spring, summer, and people talking about and sharing examples of deer being in the community, it was seemingly apparent that the population has increased, right? I live on 700 Bonnie Bray. I'm about as far as you can get from the forest preserves, and I saw an incredible amount of activity on my block, deer in my yard, so I certainly recognize that more than likely we have an increase in the population, right? So, as a board, we decided let's review this, let's see what we need to do about the deer and address the issues for residents. And so we invited the person from the IDNR to come out, make the presentation that he did. It was my understanding after that presentation, and again listening to it today, was that there was going to be an assessment of numbers, and that in part of the forest preserves working towards whether or not it was appropriate for us to go towards this culling, we would have a sense of the numbers. They would have a justification in terms of what they were asking in terms of number for the deer, right? Now, I understand in terms of having to have the IGA in order for that to happen on their land, and they have a survey of how their land is being damaged, and I don't dispute that it probably is. And again, I don't dispute the fact that we probably do in fact have to look at culling. My concern is, and I asked this in an email, what are we using as the data points to start with in order to determine the various benchmarks we want to look at to know whether or not this is effective? Meaning, are we just going to automatically assume we're going to go 5 years at this level killing, or after a year or two, are we going to be able to have measurable benchmarks to say the program is being effective and we don't have to go to that extent? When I took notes from the meeting of the IDNR, he shares that we're supposed to define the problem, then the scope, determine how to respond and how. Talks about it being a substantial process. Now I get it's perhaps different between forest preserve property and a municipality. I appreciate what you're saying there, but it still seems, if we, as residents have pointed out, if we're going to pay for this, although we certainly want to be a partner in helping the forest preserves, but if we're going to pay for this, we have to recognize and know that it's actually helping our community, right? And so what are those benchmarks in terms of the accidents, other issues, perhaps instances of Lyme disease, to know, again, whether or not this is being effective? And so the gentleman also said that we need to set specific objectives, goals, set quantifiable goals in order to have a justification for how many deer are going to be culled. That's my only concern, is that I don't feel that we really have had that information presented to us. I don't think I commend you, John. You absolutely put together a lot of information. I know you and I had a lengthy conversation in the summer to help tweak that information because, again, it's important for the community to recognize and understand what we're trying to do because, as we all know, in the absence of information, that void is filled with misinformation. And so I know we've tried. I know it's been on, but I also felt or thought we were going to have a meeting sooner in terms of the conversation and what we're working towards and getting more resident feedback from people. I know it was mentioned perhaps in September. I appreciate that there were probably other things going on and why that didn't happen. working with the other agencies. But I do feel like we needed some more data points. We absolutely are going to need some better benchmarks to determine, is this being effective? You know, to just go off the Forest Preserve determining that how their land is being impacted, is there a correlation then, or are we seeing then the added benefit of our benchmarks being reduced accordingly alongside that? That's where I'm at right now. I absolutely recognize the fact, based on what people are seeing and concerns people have, because again, I get it. For some people who feel it's beautiful and wonderful to see the deer, I appreciate that other people's concerns are serious. And we can't invalidate those concerns and we can't diminish those concerns. So how can we balance and be able to measure what we're really trying to do to get the best results for everybody? That's how I am looking at this. And I read a number of articles, and I also found, in line with what the report that was found, Cornell has a amazing, I wish I found it sooner, website that goes through talking about a lot of the same similar things of how to evaluate and look at what to do as a community in terms of evaluating the information. So to Trustee Brennan's comment about having a task force, that may be a really important thing to do, because again, we're going to have to be able to evaluate, is it working in our community, and who's going to do that evaluation? I appreciate we don't want to tax staff with more. Looking at the possibility of doing something like that, I think could be valuable. So this isn't such an easy black and white decision. And I think we really have to be thoughtful and mindful and really think through what we're doing here. That's where I fall right now.
So, if I could, a couple of things. I think it's very important to note, as Tom stated previously, you know, this is a reduction. We're not wiping out the deer. So, you know, there's plenty of them out there, and you know, we're going to be able to, you know, hopefully figure out, you know, what the right level to be is. Number two, where I applaud, you know, John and his efforts on this. He is not an expert in this, okay? And so the survey, the information that's referenced, is put together by people at the Forest Preserve. These people, this is what they go to school for. This is what they know about. We don't know about that, so we have to take the information. You know, we sent Jonathan to the front line, and he came back with the information from the experts. So I have to take that as the gospel, that they feel there's a problem. Their forest preserves have been affected by the deer population. Dave's comment about, you know, why aren't they staying in the forest preserves? There's a reason they're coming out. So if you have a glass of water and you fill it up, at some point in time, it's going to start spilling over. There is not enough food in the forest preserves for them to sustain themselves. And so therefore they're coming out in the community. Okay. The fact that they're at your house on Bonnie Bray is unbelievable. I mean, that they have gone that far over, you know. I mean, what's the next step in this thing is, you know, the chief is now, you know, standing at, you know, on the middle line at Harlem Avenue with the chief of police in Oak Park, and they're fighting over who's going to pick up the dead deer on Harlem Avenue because it's on the center line. I mean, they're everywhere. And I mean, I live on Keystone. I live near the railroad tracks. I look down the railroad tracks and I see their herds. I mean, it's not one or two, they're herds. And then lastly, I got to go back to John Rager, his family, the hoax. That's unconscionable that we wouldn't want to take care of our kids in our neighborhoods. And so I think public safety and the health and well-being of our kids is tantamount to what we do here tonight. So those are my comments. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Bob.
So I have to address some of that. Your thought that the deer don't get enough to eat in the forest preserve, and that's why they're coming out here. I don't think we've heard anything about that. I think this survey that the forest preserve has done, which we've never seen, which I would like to see, apparently says that there's, you know, damage in the forest preserve. But the truth of the matter is that we are offering this beautiful watered, fertilized smorgasbord to these deer just across the street. And they can either have that or they can eat the dry crackers in the forest preserve. And I would go for that smorgasbord every day. So I don't think that we know that there's not enough to eat there. It's just that we are offering them, the most luscious desserts they could ever have. So part of this, I think, is education. I would love to see the effect of, some changes in some of our behavior and, planting plants that the deer absolutely don't like. I live on 1419 Park, and I'm about 3 blocks from the forest preserve. I don't have any deer. I used to live on Bonnie Bray. I never saw them there either, but we moved back 4 years ago now. Maybe so I don't know. It is anecdotal. Have they shifted? They're not on 1419. They're not on the 1400 block of Park, where just 3 blocks away from the forest preserve. I can't explain it, which is why I'd like to have some more information.
Well, okay, and let's talk about that, because I don't want to make sure that because it makes it sound like we haven't talked about why they're leaving the forest preserve, and I'm going to ask John and Eric to respond, because that's an important question. You raised an important question. What I understand is the DNR and Forest Preserve, who we rely on for information, has given us information as to why, and it goes back to, I assume, why they suggest calling. So can you answer Trustee Brennan's question? I think it's important.
Right. To the best of my knowledge, and based on the conversations we've had in the presentation from the IDNR, is that the deer are leaving the forest reserves. And again, I'm not in the deer brain all the time, but their primary motivation is to look for food. That's why they're wandering about.
Because they know it's there, because we put it out.
So do they know it's there, or there's not enough?
I think we're ascribing a little too much
seriously.
intelligence to deer.
But part of it too is that I think I heard someone talk about flooding. For the last couple of years, we had some serious flooding in the forest preserve. There's nothing to eat, or there's not as much, and there's mud or whatever. So, of course, then I got to go to the smorgasbord out by where everybody else is at. And it could be a little of both. Maybe it's some of that, the flooding, some of hey, I'm sure deer are pretty smart. They can see better vegetation, better restaurants to go to, quote unquote, and they probably do go out to there. So I think it's probably a little of both.
Yeah, I mean, sure, there's probably a little of both.
Well,
But
and
you're never gonna-
part of it too, I would like to have more than verbalized information from the IDNR, or the information that we got in our packet tonight saying that there are negative impacts on flora in the area due to excessive herbivory. I wanted to see I wanted to see something from them to say, this is where we are this year, this is where we were 2 years ago, in terms of whatever it is, flora, deer count. I understand the deer count, that's something that a municipality would do and not the forest preserve. And I think that we would have a community that would, if we do in fact get to culling, would be behind us more on if we had more information to point to, say, this is actually a deer problem. These are the reasons why we can see what has happened.
I understand that, Eric. I guess where and again, I'm not playing. I'm just trying to figure out where the miscommunication is, because this started in March. We had June. We had IDNR. We had conversations with our administrative staff with Forest Preserve for a long time, enough that Mary said she's got a FOIA, yay long of information. I'm trying to figure out what we didn't provide the trustees that we could ask, that we didn't. I guess, what did we ask that would give the trustees more information?
What I would like to obtain would be
Help me
some sort of expert saying, here's the probability of success for this program. I mean, intuitively to me, when I first thought about it, it seemed to make sense that, in fact, if you take 50 deer out, there's now less deer consuming the resources available to them in their habitat. But a lot of good points have been raised tonight, and I do kind of agree with Patty that we don't really know when we've achieved success. Is it just basically no one's complaining about their hostas getting eaten, or is there some other metric? And I do think I have to agree with Patty that there should be some objective metric on, okay, We did it for 2 years. We don't need to do it anymore. And what that measure is, and I don't see that here. But I also, more importantly, I would have liked to have seen something from someone that knows what they're talking about that this will work. And I know we have, I mean, I want to kind of get the probability of success out of it, and I haven't seen that. It's just basically, okay, if it doesn't work this year, then we'll do it next year, and if it doesn't work that year, we'll keep doing it. So when do we stop doing it? I know the contract's for 5 years. But
The only thing I would comment on it, it's just, I think a lot of that work plan would be fleshed out in this agreement, what the work plan is. I mean, when you say what is our, success rate, I think they'll come back and tell you, I think if you go back to the audio, they basically said it's, the reduction of car accidents. It's basically, the reduction of Lyme disease contact. It's those things that you can measure. I mean, that's what
But do we have all those measurements?
We
That's
have-
the thing.
well,
Car
we-
accidents are about the only one we have somewhat of a data point on.
Well, right. I mean, you're correct. But we do know through IDNR that, and they're in their presentation, that clearly the population is up. We know what the deer car collision is. We have some sense of just people calling in to the village. I mean, we could definitely and maybe should set these success rates, but I don't think they're going to be different than what we see. They may be more organized, and that's maybe what you're looking for, is more of an organized grouping of data points. But I just want to make sure that somehow we give an action item to the staff that's clear and concise. Just say, go get data points. What kind of data points would you like, Patty?
Well, it's my understanding that even for the Forest Preserve to have submitted an application to the IDNR, that they would have had information in there justifying. So that in itself, I would like to see a copy of that application.
Okay, and we'll get that copy. Don't disagree with that. But do you believe that in that application sets out all the data points that the residents and others are trying to establish? I just want to be real here so that we understand what we're working on.
Yeah, and as I've mentioned, I have been clear. I have not read through the report. I'm relying on the verbal information that's been shared by the Forest Reserve District of Cook County back to the village. So I guess two things. One, I don't know if it's going to answer your questions, and two, I'm not quite sure. I understand that you're striving and seeking more data points. I'm concerned I'm not going to meet your expectations on what that is. I guess that's the...
Unless we sit around this table right now and figure out what those data points are.
Right.
I mean, because there's, I'm trying to connect the dots. So IDNR saying, hey, based on our ecosystem and based on what we understand, our own forest preserve, we know there's an overpopulation of deer. The way you control that is calling. Well,
I think you meant to say the forest preserve. not
Forest
the
preserve.
IDNR.
Did I say us?
DNR.
Oh, IDNR. I meant the forest preserve. Excuse me. My fault. The forest preserve, right? I'm just trying to get a. No. Okay.
No, I think what the
I
Forest
think you-
Preserve said is
yes.
that you can infer from the fact that there's damage to the habitat that there are too many deer in that habitat.
Correct.
That's
But
what
we've
they
never
said.
seen that report.
Well, I'm not saying that, but I'm just relaying back what Eric had said.
Yeah.
But,
Well,
Can I help you with one little thing? It'll help you to remind Jonathan.
Go ahead.
Jonathan, can I check your memory? You received an email from Mr. McCabe, the County Forest Preserve. In that email, he said that they're going to apply for 50 tags. You asked, where'd that number come from? He came back to you and said, our 30-plus years of experience and a survey.
Right, which we've stated tonight.
What the survey is.
A survey of plants?
I think...
He also said 30 years of experience plus a survey. I'm done.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead and explain again the survey. Frank, 1 minute.
But he hasn't read it.
The Forest Preserve has responded to FOIA requests saying there is no survey.
And what I have said, you are correct. There is no survey that counts the amount of the deer population.
We asked for ecological, biological damage to the forest preserves, and they said no.
No survey.
Okay.
Okay.
So I can.
You cannot provide
Okay.
the data that Patty's asking for. What we're asking is that you go back, we all take a pause, and we gather the correct data, appropriate, quantifiable, objective measures.
Well, that's what we're trying to get to, Mary. What are the quantifiable objective
You know what,
measures?
I will volunteer to be on that task force. I have spent 100 hours researching this and FOIAing everybody. I've got a lot of ideas. I will give you a starting point. I'll be on the committee. Please join me. Gigi, anybody, Ragers? I'm with you on the chip reduction as well. So it's not, we're not in opposition on this, guys. Okay.
All right. Well, here, I mean, we're looking for this common ground. If that's the, the consensus of the board that they want a committee.
50 CAGs from John McCabe, who is the something along the lines of Director of Resource Management at the Cook County Forest Preserve. The number was arrived at based on our survey of the population
You gotta
impacts.
talk up, John.
The number was arrived at based on our survey of the population, impacts or lack of on vegetation, and our 30-plus years of experience in this work, which is one of the explanations, like Eric's talked about. We've had this conversation with them throughout the formation of the IGA, but that's the one the gentleman was referring to, I believe.
Yes, that's it.
Just interested residents who were, interested and passionate about, the ability to, have safe biking in the village. And it sounds like we've got passionate, interested residents who are willing to give their time on this one too.
And we love that because we're all passionate and volunteers here too. But we would have to hire somebody to manage that. I just want to make sure. I mean, it's not going to manage itself. So
if Jonathan's sort
KOLA
of the
costs us
expert.
some dollars. Staff will call us. I just want to be practical. I'm not. We can't be like naive. It's going to cost us money to manage it, and I have no issues with that. I just want to be practical. So if the consensus of the board says let's step back and find these data points and bring a task force and hire a consultant, I'll go with. I think we're not giving enough credit to our staff and Jonathan, who particularly has spent a lot of time doing this. I think we're wanting a different answer, truthfully, and if that's what we're interested in, then I'm okay with that too. But I just think we have to be honest and real with ourselves. Is that if we're not happy with the work that has been done or feel like it's not enough, and we want to create a task force that will create more information, I'm okay with that. It just has to be managed.
Well, I want peace in the village.
I think,
and I think that if we have residents working together, regardless of where that goes, what the answer is.
Here, I'm not disagreeing that we want peace. Every topic we pick up, and I don't, I've been here for a long time. I think in the end of the day, we had peace. I mean, we may have disagreements, but we have peace. So we always go for that end result. So
I do
agree.
want to recognize that I understand that you guys have done so much work on this. I want it to be reflective in the information that we get, that the Forest Preserve provides you, so we can back up, what we do in the community. And I will take it a step further too. I'd like to see alternative options besides culling tried first. I think we talked about the undergrowth on Thatcher and having that maybe removed, trying other things before we get to a point that are inexpensive as well. But I don't mind voting on culling if that is going to be a solution to the safety of the public here in River Forest.
I don't either. I mean, I think, but I will tell you, all of those are not mutually exclusive solutions. I mean, I think some of even Mary and Carrie, you guys had some really great, lights, traffic signals, cut back on the foliage. All of those, to me, those are not mutually exclusive to culling. They are in addition. And I think your packet, if I'm correct, has, the cutback of the, along Thatcher Avenue. The traffic, we're putting up traffic lights. We've got deer crossing signs.
I would honestly be interested in trying those things first and seeing if
they're
those
done.
things
They're
work.
being done. I mean, some of the cutback on, I could be wrong, but go ahead and answer it.
Okay.
Pardon me? I might be wrong, but what?
Well, no, I mean they're on Thatcher. There are deer warning signs. We have recently installed some speed limit signs that you may have seen that were put in the budget. We've obviously got
Stop signs on.
I
Is that sarcastic? Really?
Division Avenue would really help.
Why not Division would be great.
One between Chicago and North.
Okay.
um,
Wow.
I think what Eric is saying.
All right, hang on. Go
yeah,
ahead.
but Eric, but Eric,
Eric, just please.
we've done that. Certainly, could we do more things? Absolutely. I apologize that some of the data sets that some of you were looking for were not in the report. But at the end of the day, we're relying on people who do this day in and day out to advise us on what they believe their professional recommendation is. And so, to the extent more information is needed, we can certainly do that. And as I've always said, we work for you, so we're going at this at your direction. The desire to move forward with this wasn't based on John or Eric or the staff with having nothing else to do. There was a direction because we had a lot of residents as well, some of which who have made some fantastic comments tonight and have been very thoughtful in their response. And there have been also a lot of people who have come forward and said, we believe the village needs to do something. This is a situation that's out of control based on their belief. And so that's how we got here today. Again, whether we go back and do these other things and task force, whatever, I would say, and you can look at it from two perspectives. It can be mutually exclusive or not. We can do these things and still move forward with the program, or you could choose not to. But then I don't suspect anything would happen in this winter season. You would have to postpone that a year if you don't do anything.
Right. So, again, I think the question we have to ask ourselves is, go ahead.
No, I guess I had a point of clarification. If you have this committee and they're going to work on all the scenarios, and I would say let's let the board back off from what the option should be and let's listen, and then we can make a decision then. But I want to go back to what I thought we also said was, and I thought it was Trustee Karji, go back to with the Forest Preserve and ask them, is this ultimately what they're recommending, meaning culling? And if I would also say that either if they jump to culling is the answer, or I want to hear too, are the other options not worth pursuing at this point and just go to culling? I mean, I don't. If we're asking the Fire Preserve for their expertise, I don't want to tie their hands as to what the basis of that would be, whatever it is.
But Russ, and I just for everybody else's edification, I want to make sure. I mean, that we're saying that the staff didn't have enough information. I want to know specifically.
Well, let me clarify.
Yeah,
let me clarify
because it would be
First of
helpful
all,
for the staff to understand specifically of what's not in your packet that you need more of.
I am trying to resolve the issue. First of all, let me just say thank you, village staff, Eric, John. I am not picking on you. I'm just saying, but obviously you can see there's a struggle not only within the board, but with the community. And we're trying to resolve that issue is what we're doing. So we appreciate your patience. We appreciate your cooperation and all the work you've done. So that is nothing to diminish from our point. So when we're proceeding like this, it has nothing to do with you. So, or we're not blaming you, I should say. So I'm just trying to get also, if we're going to put whatever committee or force, but I don't want us going in different directions. I'm trying us to say, this is the plan, this is what we're going to do, so that the next time we're discussing this, we're not going back in different directions again. So that's what I'm trying to get at, is if we're going to have this committee, then let the committee come up with their recommendations. I don't know if we can put a time frame on that, or maybe the first meeting is get your schedule or scope of what you're planning to do and when you think you can have it done. I still don't know whether the Forest Preserve can do it. I mean, but that's if we're going in that direction. Okay. I have comments about the actual agreement too, so I don't know if we're premature to even get to that point.
Well, no, because the actual agreement kind of almost says that that's what they're going to work on.
Oh,
so I mean, the number 5 looks like the lead party along with the village would work on a plan.
But there's some things that are missing that least
Oh,
for
yeah,
me,
that
would
needs,
be
I mean, I would like,
that.
I mean, assist with law enforcement site security. I'd like to know what that means.
Well, yeah, I mean, so.
Yeah.
So if I could, so I read the report that was submitted on the Humane Society, and I spoke with a resident today who was very passionate about it. When I read that report, aside from eliminating the 8-foot high fence along Thatcher, I don't think any of the residents who live along Thatcher that face Forest Preserve want an 8-foot high wall in front of their house. It seems like all the other stuff that's in there are long-term solutions to it. And so when we bring this committee together, we think we have an immediate problem right now. And so what's the short-term fix and what's the long-term fix of this? Because again, correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, we have a very short window of time in which to do this. So we could be sitting here next year talking about this, correct?
Yeah, they do most of their management starting around December 1st and then go December, January, February, maybe into March. They prefer to do it when there's snow cover on the ground.
So does it make any sense to ask this Mr. McCabe or to join us for a meeting to kind of lay this whole thing out so the public can hear exactly what the Forest Preserve is thinking on this, as opposed to FOIAs and I'm going to jump into this thing, I'm going to jump out of this thing, I got other things to do in the county. I mean, is there some way to kind of encapsulate this into a meeting or two where the public hears exactly from the experts? Don't take it the wrong way. The experts on what the problem is and what the resolution is.
And agreed. I just want to though set expectations that I don't think they're going to differ for what you heard that it was told about. John, I think what's going to be different, and I think that's what all of us need to think about, is what is it that we want to agree on, and maybe this is what the task force to say, are we successful? What are the data points and the metrics that we're going to need to get this thing? And what is success? And we have to define what success is. So, I mean, but that's work. I mean, I don't think the Forest Preserve is going to tell us that. I think we have to tell ourselves, do we want the car collisions to go from 8 to 2? Do we want them to go from 8 to 7? Do we want them to, what do we want car collisions? What do we want the Lyme disease contact to go from 10 to 0?
I want a biologist to tell me why we have this problem.
Okay, but they did.
Well,
You want?
There seems to be a lack of understanding or a lack of trust from the data because of the word survey that's been being bantered about. So have them come, tell us what survey means, have a biologist explain why we have the problem and what the biologist believes we should do this.
But in addition to what Bob's saying, I mean, our Q&A is also inconsistent because, and I'm not diminishing the 3 people that were here that spoke about their children, but what I'm trying to explain is that our Q&A number 40 is saying that we're not one of the counties that are suffering with this chronic waste disease. So I understand that, but we also talked about the chronic waste disease. So I'm just saying an example of
The IDNR guy, when he was here, said, one of the issues that you have, I think, to the question of what do we do with the deer meat was we have to test it for the chronic waste disease, and then we make the determination. So that's where that was brought up during that.
And I appreciate that. I'm just saying inconsistencies in what is being published, and I don't mean it's malicious, and I don't mean it's deceiving. I'm not getting to that point. What I'm saying is that there are inconsistencies that's causing people to have different understandings, including, I'm not saying people aren't experiencing Lyme disease. I'm just saying that you'll have, what I think you were asking is someone's going to come and say, listen, the Lyme disease could be attributed or most likely attributable to the deer or whatever. And I don't know if that's where you're going.
Okay. So I think it sounds like the consensus of the board is to pause, which is fine, and to put together a task force. And I guess I'd like to know how we're going to move forward. So trustees, if you can give the staff an indication of how you think we should move forward with the task force.
Well, like I said earlier, the only task force I've been on, and it was worked really well, was with a staff person and it was actually a staff person, volunteer commissioners, and then the rest were just interested and passionate residents.
KOLA, no, they were consultant.
I know, but I'm calling them a staff because they were the,
Okay, we paid them. So
Right.
paid consultant. to
or
lead
or
the
a staff
task
person who's paid. Like Jonathan's been spending his time on this.
So you want him to spend more time on leading? I'm just trying to get an understanding.
That's what I would propose, since
Okay,
he's
is that
already
the
he's already
consensus of the board?
hip deep into it.
Yeah, well, he's got a billion things else on his plate, but okay.
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, Eric?
Yeah, I would want to review. Kind of we were getting towards the end of this, and we have some other things coming up with budget and CIP. So I'd certainly we can execute on what you want to see. I would just prefer that I evaluate John's time and then make a commitment on what that looks like.
Well, and come back with a recommendation. Either it's John or it's a consultant.
Correct.
That we hire to manage the task force.
Eric,
That Mary's going to be on.
Well, and quite frankly, it may behoove us to find someone who is more of a subject matter
Totally.
expert.
I think so.
Because there is obviously a disconnect on what we've provided and what you
Yeah.
need to move forward.
Could you inquire?
Because we are not subject matter wildlife experts.
But could you inquire with the Forest Preserve to see if the cookback can come? Like Bob had
Yeah,
asked?
McCabe, we'll
Okay,
have him
right.
come, but I don't think that he's going to help us with the task
Well,
force.
part of the
That would
issue
be
I
a
have
one-off.
is his
Yeah.
recommendation is somewhat ipsy dixit. It's this is what we should do because this is what I say we should do.
Mm-hmm.
I would have liked a more fulsome rationale behind his opinion. I guess I assume that was there. So, and maybe he, in this sort of setting, maybe he can explain why he thinks this is the appropriate thing, and maybe that's persuasive. But just simply saying, based on my 30 years, I think that's what we should do isn't good enough.
Understood.
They're
I
going
think the other direction for a potential task force is to again have them talk about what the benchmark's going to be. And how is that going to be evaluated? I mean, to say, and I absolutely, in terms of any concerns about Lyme, if that's in fact true, maybe it is that we need to have some sort of survey of residents on how many residents or pets, and only to how do we know that we've reached the level that things have gone down because
I'm
of it?
uncomfortable asking someone about their health.
Yeah.
I mean, the
Right.
Uyghurs and Mrs. Hope
Right.
came out.
Plus, now you're talking about another
Well,
cost.
but-
I mean,
but
I
so
hear
again,
$200,000, and we're
how
up
do
to
you
about
know
50
it's
right
the
now,
deer that have
just to do this. So I want to make sure that we all understand, because we all walk away say, okay, we got it, we paused it. Then what happens is all this work has to happen, and there's nobody behind it. And I just want to make sure the trustees have an opinion on who should be behind it, what kind of benchmarks that we should have, and what consultant we should hire.
Can I suggest before we decide this, and certainly can't decide now, but just give us an opportunity to reflect on the issue and
Yeah.
maybe come back with ideas?
Absolutely. I think that's probably a good idea.
I know, there's no way you're gonna match
No.
the Lyme disease.
Of course not.
So, I mean, take that completely off the table.
Right.
Ticks feed the
Right.
host off deer. I mean, that's indisputable. So, I mean, you're not gonna be able to measure who's diagnosed with Lyme or not when we have, a very small community.
Ticks also host
Right.
Absolutely. Right.
So that's just, that's pie in the sky sort of survey. But anecdotally, with two families with children, I know of a third family in River Forest with children same ages, and one of their children has it. And this is a statistical analysis.
Yes, it is.
So I understand why we need data and benchmarks for certain things, but sometimes anecdotal evidence is all you're ever gonna have.
And-
You just need to kind of say, well, it's better safe than good.
Yeah. And then just to, I mean,
You can't do a study on a small community.
and I think that's what's going to end up here. And I think what we have to do as a board of trustees is to eventually decide, is this something that we want to do, for the community? Because you're right, Gigi, there's going to be a lot of anecdotal information. I mean, June 24th, there was 90 people here saying something very different. So, it is, and that's why we have to hear everybody. And so we'll step back from it. We'll reflect, as Trustee Karji indicated, but I am going to bring it back so that the trustees can give direction to the staff, because I don't think we should drop it, to give the staff on the task force, the goals and objectives of the task force, and in the end, what are we trying to achieve? And then we'll put a price tag to it so that you all know what that is, so that we don't walk away saying that's free and this costs $200,000, because that would be wrong. Okay, that would be wrong information.
So Greg, where do we go with the motion?
Yeah, so
Oh.
Trustee O'Connell made the motion. It was seconded
Yep.
by Trustee Karji. Unless you both agree to withdraw the motion, we need to have a vote on it. So,
I'll withdraw my second. I'll withdraw my first.
okay. So
Okay.
then there's no pending motion at this time.
Okay, very good. All right. Yeah. All right, so we'll move on to then the next. Yeah, let's take 2 minutes, because I got to go to the bathroom.
Yes, sir.
Yes, the IDNR said that doesn't happen.
Probably. I knew, because I asked that question.
From Forest Park?
I know that was the real pressure point there. Yeah, I don't think we were.
Yeah, they don't. So like the deer that would be at the Oak Park Country Club are not going to come over. Hang out and fetch.
Okay.
Not because they feel they're too good. Just because
So is part of the problem in North Avenue's too severe bears?
that may be part of it. I think they just generally stay in their kind of more of their own habitat.
Oh
Like
my
the guys
gosh.
from the IDNR, they'll wander east, but
That's
then
like
they
the
come back to their
deal
home base.
here. This is like, I need to make a link to this and send it
It's
to.
probably him. Probably more eloquently. But
No,
yeah.
no.
This is it.
A little bit
Oh,
of
boy.
everything. This is a sampler menu. The luscious desserts.
Oh, that's right.
Sorry,
That
Eric.
was-
I hope you didn't think we were picking it.
Oh God, no.
Oh,
No, I don't.
That was a good phrase.
Yeah.
Sure. We have the same. Here's my dessert. Okay.
No, but I do think, again, I was sort of expecting, like, some sort of expert report.
No, I get it. I get it.
You're never going to get I think people don't.
Right.
This is probably a point I should have raised. You can't get you can't count deer because you can't mark. You can't tell the one I counted today was the one that I counted yesterday. Correct. So that the
But some
inferential approach.
municipalities do it because that's part of municipalities package when they.
No, that's a survey of citizen residents.
That's more the survey.
Oh, the residents.
The only time I've heard of them counting rare instances where they tried with their snowpack. When there's snow, they can contrast them, and they can see a little bit better. It's not perfect though, but they have to get up on a plane.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. No, that's what I was just saying. You have to do it.
Forest Preserve has its own helicopter though.
We did years of analysis, and honestly now I'm trying to figure out what did they analyze? Was it just car accidents? And maybe it was.
It might be.
Wow. You're not thinking of people working again outside of you're not thinking of working outside of our village board meeting day.
I was educating you.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
I would love to show it to you. All right.
Anyway.
They're some of them are a little damaged because they're
Well, we'll be very careful when we look at something going on.
Well, that's about just about as perfect as you can get.
Done by 8. You can done by no, we can done by 6.
Interesting. Very interesting.
All right.
Well, I will be. Please.
Please. And we'll go together.
I mean, if someone has an idea, because
Yeah.
I don't want to just have artists come and it's not up to me. I mean, I'm willing to do it if everyone else wants to, but my issue is I get together and such an issue. It's not an issue.
I don't know what to tell you. I mean, it was.
No, Jan, that's not true. You can always add something.
I think what we need to do, seriously, the next, we have to calculate what it's going to take and how much. I think we be honest. I think everyone walked away saying, "Okay, we lost." And I think we just got to be honest with everybody.
And so there may well be benefit in doing this all. I'll propose it to you.
And everybody knows.
I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
It is funded.
But I don't want to waste
the digital hunter.
Yeah.
He buys his permit.
Right.
He buys his sheets. They buy the kit. They bear all
Right.
the expense. They get their FOI cards.
Yeah.
Yes.
In this case, so I am.
You know, that is one thing.
Okay, Mary, you're on. So
For so long period of time, they were so dedicated.
Sometimes it's fun making the sausage jam.
I just didn't want
Not deer sausage.
deflate by, okay, what are we gonna, you know,
Is it? I
we're all
have
looking
not.
at each other
Which
like
one?
clearing our mouths, like, okay, what do you guys want to talk about?
Yeah.
Well, I'll talk to John. I mean, we can maybe, how about this? Have John float an email, ask him some potential dates, and then we'll come together and talk about whether or not there's even a reason, rather than, and I'm not really deciding, obviously, if someone said let's meet, I would be all aboard, but let's talk about maybe what our mission is. No, he's actually going to Montreal. He's supposed to. He's driving to Montreal for his school because it's so expensive. Maybe I think Cheryl said it was $60 round trip to go from Boston because he has to go on Tuesday, so he's leaving on Wednesday with everybody else. Boston is a third of their population. I didn't realize that, and so the airlines know they got him by the because that's the one day where everyone's out, so they know that they can get us the maximum. Hi, Jane, how are you?
See you later.
So Ryan actually Saturday. But thank you.
What is, are you saying the issue is ticks?
No, I'm just saying, there's a big issue, so now that is part of the issue.
All right, that's all. I'm not Nikki.
Oh, thank you. No,
The resulting.
Yeah.
The results of them being in the neighborhood takes to damage.
I just when I heard you say, oh, you guys have the same children in this time. So how does that translate? And I don't see it as a
This isn't a 2-minute And I think you drove this process 2015, 2016, 2017. You didn't go your way. Your board table in 2015 didn't give you the traction. So now you can deny this guy with 3 grand board members. You could get on the board table. Yeah, you could rest. And you were like, taking up the torch again. Here you go. Okay, it's on pause. Let's pause. We'll have this discussion. I'll leave it aside. My thoughts, my
rolling. Crazy. Very Disney. She did a lot of work. Rubbing his head, you know, rubbing all over the place. I'm like, oh, that's it. Oh, and I went out to the yard. Yeah, it's serious.
Tell me at what time, or somebody text, Cheryl text me when you're gonna go over and I'll head over.
We'll get those.
Okay. And that's why they suggested. Yeah, we do. Okay.
Fully
So that's
understand your residents' concerns.
this whole survey thing kind of conflating. It's okay. We're conflating mystical. I won't say mythical. I think it might be. Forest that's my take. I mean, generating is pretty good, but I mean, it's like everything. It's like
Moving a barge down. We always laugh. That's what we call certification. I've never seen it. Government agency. I'm out of the office.
So I was thinking, like, how can I help? So you pick out.
They're not gonna notice. Yeah, well, some people will, the kids won't. You're right.
That's why the argument that the forest
Like I said, I gotta like do this kind of get spiffy up a bit. You're off Wednesday. I don't even know if I was supposed to. So then she just has school tomorrow and then Wednesday. And I'm like, all right, I gotta go at 5:30.
Got the over. We all said
The last one you were you get your meals at 8:30.
That's why I like did everything so I could literally I did such a baby. Oh my, but I had a late lunch. All right.
Let's get on our pauses. Okay. Alrighty.
Here. Trustee, no, it was Trustee Bob, I think. Which response to it? Your response to it. What about Bob?
Right. What about Bob? Alrighty. Okay, so where are we? So now we are at right, zoning. So 8A, right? Yeah. So if I get a motion and a second, so we can discuss this matter.
Motion to approve an ordinance granting the requested variations to section 10-9-5, 10-9-6 of the zoning ordinance at 535 Mineral.
I'll second.
Okay. Where do you want to begin?
Is your architect not here?
Not here.
This is fun. I got a lot of questions for him.
I got answers.
Okay. If you don't mind taking the podium.
All right. That's good.
I'm Michelle Elfin, owner at 535 Monroe in River Forest.
So, And it's really unfortunate your architect's not here, because I listened to the zoning board meeting.
Yeah.
And there was some confusion in his testimony about when he drew the plans that are currently your house. He seemed to suggest that he drew them after the carpenter persuaded you, but was the construction up when the architect then did the plans, or did they build according to plans he drew?
So what happened was, so those plans were drew in September, after the original set of plans were drawn, because what had happened in the field, if anyone has done a home renovation, I probably don't suggest it at this point, but to answer your question, what had happened in the field was when we added the addition, we took off, part of the roof,
My question
and
is
then the roof started it was buckling, and it was rotating. So what had to happen pretty quickly was that roof had to come off because it was structurally not sound. So when the architect drew up the new plans, so the contractor could build them, so it didn't come on our existing property that we had spent a lot of time and money renovating. It was just done in the field, and he drew plans. It did not have suggested heights for the knee wall. We were just told we have to stay under 35, make sure you're under 35 feet, which we are. So our home is under 35 feet. I don't know if everyone got the plans from the architect, but it kind of shows how it was built and how it was proposed. It also shows on A17 kind of what we could have done with the house, which was make it massive and right up into our property, our neighbor's property line, and we're keeping it modest. We're just new homeowners and new renovation.
The restriction on floor area ratio, that is that you not only is an issue of the height of the building,
yeah.
But else, did he raise that issue with you before the construction was done?
Neither the contractor or the architect did, no. Our only guidelines, and we thought by hiring local contractors and architects, was that they would have our best interests at heart, and it was not raised. No, absolutely not, because I would have taken the building down myself and did it right.
So it's really unfortunate your architect's not here. The contractor apparently showed unapproved plans to the building inspector. So he showed him plans that hadn't been gone through a permit process, and that's what the building inspector used to sign off on the designation.
Yeah,
Did the contractor tell you he was going to use the unapproved plans as opposed to the plans that have been submitted for?
When he was asked for plans, he gave the most updated plans, and there was no scheme, there was no ill intent whatsoever. When the inspectors came in, we wanted to make sure we were making the most structurally sound, beautiful home, a modest home for our 3 little boys. We had one bathroom. And instead of moving in the home that moving from the home, when we moved here 7 years ago, I was pregnant with with our second. And we thought about abandoning ship and abandoning this tiny little home on the 500 block of Monroe, and we fell in love with our neighbors. We fell in love with our block, and we decided to go through the unknown of a home renovation.
Did the contractor ever tell you when he was building this non-conforming structure that he had to resubmit these plans to get them permitted because this wasn't what was submitted to the village?
No.
But you said he's familiar with the practices in River Forest.
He should have been.
And more importantly, your architect should have been.
Yeah,
So,
there's a lot of people that should have been.
That's to Tom's point about it's unfortunate your architect isn't here, because really we have a big issue with your architect.
Okay.
Okay, well, I have a big issue with the contractor that
Well,
gave
of course,
unpermitted.
but I mean, I think it starts with, and I have gone through several home renovations. So,
Yeah.
The contractor identified a problem. He got to the architect to try to solve it quickly, and he
Yeah.
was looking out for your best interest to get it done. But they missed a big step in the process.
Absolutely.
And that's, the safety of your building going
Yeah.
forward is why we permit.
And that's why, we have to apply for a variation to figure out if our home is structurally sound and wonderful as is, or if we go through another Chicago winter with more construction, taking off a perfectly sound roof, and doing it over 14, not 14 inches lower. We're under the height requirement. But the knee walls, is everyone familiar with the knee wall? I was not up until this point. They're just those, so 14 inches lower is what we're seeking a variance for, so we don't have to tear off our roof. And
at the hearing, your architect said that he
Yeah.
told you that you're okay on the height, that
Yeah.
the limitation was
35 feet.
and you were below that.
Mhm.
And he said something that struck me as incredibly odd, that I don't share all of the zoning concerns with my clients. I would want to know if my plan didn't conform with zoning.
We would have wanted to know that as
Okay.
well. Yes, we would
But
want to have wanted.
Do you remember that? I'm trying to figure out how this took place, because to me that was an incredibly odd thing to say. I don't go through the nuts and bolts of zoning. Well, here there was a glaring problem with the plans that he gave, and he told you nothing at all about the floor area ratio.
I didn't even think to ask. I
Well,
thought
I would-
everyone was doing
Until I was
their
on the village
jobs.
board, I'd never even heard of floor area ratio. So
Yeah.
I'm not holding you accountable for not knowing. The concern I have is with the professional.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you're kind of a victim here, I think,
Mhm.
because your contractor violated village rules by presenting to an inspector plans that hadn't been permitted.
Yeah.
And apparently, your architect didn't tell you that there was a huge problem because you needed to get a variance, and so you, relying on these two professionals,
Yeah.
you went ahead with the project in good faith. And it's unfortunate. Here's my problem with this: that if we do this, if we grant this variance, we will have converted the zoning process from one where you seek permission to
Mhm.
one where you seek forgiveness.
I hope
And you
no
won't
one
be the
goes
last.
through this.
You won't be the last, unfortunately, because we just had one a year ago where someone was looking for a increase. It was actually the same issue as the knee wall issue.
Yeah.
And they came in,
Mhm.
but now people are going to be incentivized to basically come in with one set of
I hope
plans.
they're not incentivized to come in and go through this.
We have to be consistent with what
Yeah.
we do. And so, if we give it to you because it was a mistake, well, then are we going to? And I genuinely, I hold you completely, almost wholly non-culpable, or whatever word I'm looking for. But the concern I have is then, are we going to have to assess the credibility of the applicants, especially when the architect? I mean, that's troubling. Did you ask them to
So,
come?
Tom, can I just, my understanding.
Wait, Patty, let him finish,
Did you
please.
ask them to come tonight?
To be honest, I thought he did a horrible job when he came in here at first. I thought he was covering his ass when he came in here the first time. I was really upset with how the whole thing went down. I'm upset with the whole process. And I didn't think he came up here and tried to speak for me or my family. I thought he came up here to try to speak for himself and cover his own ass. So I did not want him present here. And then we got a $2,000 bill on top of that. I'm sorry. Asking us to pay more in damages that he didn't address what he did. He just replaced the blame, and I just didn't think he should be here.
Okay,
Okay,
so maybe
that-
I misunderstood in terms of what the architect was saying, but I was actually at the meeting and then re-listened to it. My understanding, the way he explained it, was that he did draw up new plans to change the roof to match your lower roof.
Yeah.
Had it lower, kept it under the height. My understanding was that it was the contractor who decided, with conversations with your husband, to kick up the knee wall to make it higher. And then he had said, when he got to the house and saw that that's not what he drew, my take was that he did draw the new line, didn't discuss why I'm just doing the roof line this way and
Yeah,
not making it
exactly.
any taller, because that was his
He
point.
said it
of,
was
I don't go through
aesthetically-
every zoning code to tell you
Mhm.
why
But
I'm
so-
telling you
so-
what this
so,
week to
Patty,
do.
for that to be true, the carpenter would have had to have built that new wall without plans. But that's the only thing I can
There
figure
were-
out.
I don't know that one way or the other, but
Yeah.
that's how I heard it, as the way it was described that
Yeah.
way. So my question too, in terms of the plans, are plans that have been approved stamped in a way so that when the inspector comes to look at them, they know that those have been the approved stamp?
Yes.
Okay.
The village stamps every
I figured it's
piece
probably
of
the
paper
case,
that's
but
part of the approved plan set. When not all municipalities do it that way. Some stamp just the cover page. We prefer to stamp every page to avoid issues like this. When the inspector was on site, he asked for the approved plan set. Whether he checked every page or not, I don't know. I've spoken with the inspector. But the set that he was presented matched what was built, but not what was approved. The inspector caught The inspection happened, let me go back. I took a look at this. There was an inspection in December of 2018. The next inspection was August 30th. The stop work order was issued September 16th. So there was a little bit more than 2 weeks before we had been called back out there. We caught this and put a stop to it. But it was missed. I mean, the inspector fully acknowledges. He can't tell me for sure if every page was stamped, but he did ask for the approved plan set on site.
No.
If
There's
the
a lot of mistakes
inspector,
here.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I would just say there's a lot of unfortunate mistakes that happened here.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mrs. Elvin, do you have a general contractor?
Sorry?
Do you have a general contractor on this project?
Yes, we do.
Okay. And are they local?
He is in, I don't know, actually. I don't know where he resides about an hour away, so no, he's not local.
Okay. Right.
The architect was.
I don't know.
Do they have to be registered with the village?
General contractors actually do not. They do not have to, but all the individual subcontractors, correct, Lisa? All the trades have to be. So the carpenter, the plumber, etc.
And if, I don't know, if the inspector would have came in and said, give me plans, and if he would have said this is not up to code, the knee walls have to be this tall and whatever, we would have not continued work. We would have obeyed. We weren't in this to break rules. We weren't in this to try to get away with something. We weren't in it to get you. We're volunteers. We're coaches. We're team moms, PTO moms. And I know we request a variance, and it's supposed to be a case by case. So I understand you talk many cases, but I would ask that you do this on a case by case. And on this case, there were balls dropped that I don't believe are normally dropped, and on this level. So this is why we're asking for a variance.
But again, I think the problem with the inspector was he asked for the approved plans, and your contractor gave him plans that had not been submitted to the board. So
I don't know if it was hey, can I see the plans? I don't know how this goes down. I wasn't there. I don't think. I mean, my contractor he's been doing this from what I can see, relatively well. The home looks beautiful. The inspector, I remember on one of the inspections, because he passed us for 2 inspections. On one of them, he just commented how well we were doing with the house and how structurally sound it was, and the inspector was very, very complimentary. So it made me very proud of the house. And I can't see the contractor or anyone on any level really being out to get the inspector. And I don't know how. If he was gonna look at, I don't know. Sorry.
I guess, again, where we're struggling is, you're a professional architect who's doing this, who hands a set of plans to a guy who just identified a roof problem, and this is like a Sunday afternoon project. And so, that's where, your architect is really who we want to talk to. So,
yeah, he would tell you he drew up the plans to he drew up the roof with higher knee walls to look better on this wall, and he would put the blame on the contractor.
But what he didn't do is he didn't come into this building and drop a set of plans off for somebody to review. That's his responsibility, right?
Yeah, and
all right, yeah, but you guys what's the point of questioning here? So, I mean, I think it's fairly clear. I mean, I don't want to put you constantly on the spot here. And so, obviously there was an issue with your contractor. There's an issue with your architect. There's probably an issue with our inspector. But truthfully, where we're at is we have 2 variances before us that would set precedent in River Forest. And that's where I think is the biggest issue we have. We rarely, if I don't even remember ever agreeing to a 45.3% FAR in the history of my involvement here, and never agreed to a 3-story. And with all of the justification you came through in terms of, it wasn't purposeful, it wasn't malicious, it wasn't all of that. What we struggle with and what the board has to consider
Yeah.
is this: if we want to set precedent with this, and then secondly, we have other means by which to try to stop people lying to our village officials, not us here, but inspectors and other people. So that's what we're dealing with right now. So I'm going to ask the trustees to kind of center around a little bit of that discussion. Is how comfortable are you with this variance request?
I'm uncomfortable with it. I don't like to, I like to rely on the expertise of the ZBA, but on this one, I agree with the minority vote on there. And I think there's a real concern that if we grant this variance, that it is going to set a precedent that we don't want to set.
The concern I have is hardship in the context of zoning is related to the land itself, not mistakes that are made.
Right.
And so, it's an amorphous concept, but we try and limit it to there's a problem with the land that makes us unable to do this. We've now introduced human failure as another hardship if we grant this. That's the concern I have. I mean, I can't, I've been struggling with this thing all day, because I certainly am sympathetic to you. I understand exactly where you're coming from, but I think your recourse is against the professionals you hired because they didn't do the job they were supposed to do. And I'm not, to me, that's the concern I have. It's like basically saying, okay, these guys screwed up. Can you fix it? And that's why I really want to draw up, because I was going to really yell at your architect, and I can't really do
Yeah. Sorry, I'm mad and frustrated with a lot of people right now.
So that's my position.
And we have 3 little boys, and we thought we were going to be in our home for the holidays, and we were just really excited and to have the house open to the elements for another Chicago winter, and what that would do to all the progress we've made. And I just think it would be detrimental, and I understand you guys need to set goals for, I don't know, the future and whatnot, but
yeah, we need to ensure that we have our residents comply with
Yeah.
zoning. And here's why: we would have 5 times the people that you just saw here if we were allowing people just to build what they want.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we can't
No.
get through the deer conversation. Could you imagine
Yeah.
if we had, and then people might think there was agendas for that too. So all we're trying to do is be honest with you, like we do every time, and say, this is a serious issue for us.
Yeah.
And if we granted what the zoning board granted, there's consequences for us going forward.
And I do
as a village board.
Yeah, and I do want to reiterate, if the inspector, had gotten the plans and said, hey, these aren't approved, that's a seal, that's something I do my due diligence on, we would have stopped everything that we were doing and had done it right. We wouldn't have kept, putting the electrical in, the plumbing, the the insulation, the drywall. We wouldn't have done an insane amount of work on this house if the inspector would have said, hey, this different ones. These just don't have the seal that we are supposed to have on every single piece of paper. This isn't it. So trade. And the carpenter or whoever would have said, oh, thank you for that. Here you go. And then that would have been caught. We would have done it differently. The inspector came in twice and didn't say a word except, this is great, keep doing work. And so we kept doing work.
If I could just point out, because I was at the hearing, the sworn testimony at the hearing does not agree with that. The sworn testimony at the hearing is that the inspector was presented with supposedly official plans that the village had never approved. So the idea that the inspector did something wrong here is not supported by the sworn testimony from the zoning hearing, which you can listen to the recording of and read the minutes in your packet.
I thought then it would have had those seals on every page. It would have had
the sworn testimony at the hearing was that the inspector was presented with plans that the village had never approved. That was the testimony from the hearing.
I don't think I have more to add to this except to say that I agree with Trustee Brennan and Hennick's and Karji's sentiments.
That's not true.
What?
That's not true.
They were presented with stamped drawings. They were stamped. Those were official stamped drawings that were provided.
They were stamped by an architect.
This
They
is
were
my
not
husband.
stamped
Oh,
by
I'm
the
sorry.
He came in
Well, come
late.
forward. Do you mind? And talk on.
Kids talk about
No? Okay.
I mean, I will.
Well, it's just so because people, so it can be on the record.
Sorry,
No worries. Yeah.
I apologize. I wasn't there at the last two meetings, but my name is Barrett Elfin. I'm Michelle's husband. So I can't really speak on exactly what was stated there. So that's why I wasn't speaking tonight. But the drawings that were on site are stamped drawings. Those were presented to the inspector, and they were both signed off on both inspections. As my wife stated, the all inspections, all rough inspections were passed and signed off on per the drawing set that was stamped on site and provided to the inspector.
I think the disagreement is they were stamped by a licensed architect, but they were not stamped by the village approved for construction. I think what you're saying, sir, is that then your architect signed off on them and said, yes, they are, in my opinion, structurally appropriate. But the plans that we have, I'm just
I apologize.
have stamps, separate stamps, in addition to the architectural stamp that say they've been approved for construction.
No, I'm well aware of what you're saying. I
Okay.
understand. I do understand, and I can tell you that the drawings that are on site in that house are the same drawings that are stamped by the city of River Forest, or are stamped by our architect, and they're sitting in our house today, still.
That is not what was presented to the inspector.
It's
The inspector reviewed a construction set of drawings that met building code requirements. They were not reviewed for zoning code compliance. They were structurally correct. They were built in compliance with the building code. The building inspector, who's hired through B&F Technical Code Services, goes out on site to ensure compliance with the building code, which is separate from our zoning code. There may be an approved set of drawings, but what is built out there right now was not presented to the Village of River Forest for review with compliance with our zoning ordinance, which is why we are here today.
Okay, you're right. That's correct. Okay, so I see what you're saying. So the third level. Okay, that's right. So what it was presented to the inspectors were the stamped drawings by both the city and the architect, but not to include that with the new roof line. Is that correct? Am I missing that?
They were never, those plans that you built off of were never given to the village. We did not review those.
For the new roof line, correct? That's the rest of the house was all.
They were not submitted to us, period, end of story. I mean, we didn't review them at all. Your architect reviewed them and signed off on them and stamped them with his professional architectural stamp, saying, I certify that these to be structurally sound to the best of my ability, et cetera.
Prepared by a licensed architect.
Right, correct. And then those were given to the contractor somehow, and then he started building off of those. And at no point did anyone circle back with the village and say, are we okay with these in terms of proceeding?
Correct. The scope of the original permit did not include any work with the roof.
Correct.
So when the roof,
correct.
when the roof needed to be modified, the plan set should have come back in for review and approval. And that's, I think, where the breakdown began to occur.
Correct. I agree with that. I agree. But I feel like what people are saying here is that our architect stamped the drawings and then we just started building, and that's how it was. And we had no approval from the village at all. I think where the breakdown happened is when in the field, we needed to make a decision, and instead of going through the right process of getting this done, we were given direction from the architect on the height limit. That's all we ever heard about was the height limit. Mm-hmm. So, we moved forward with this, and we tried to build the house as obviously as aesthetically and structurally sound as we possibly could. And what is the area? What is it? The
floor area ratio.
Floor area ratio. I mean, that word, those three words I didn't know anything about it either. So even after we became aware of this, you know, we even said, well, we'll lower the height. It's not about that. We'll lower the height of the ceiling. It's like, well, too late. It's already here, you know. So here we are, and I understand this. You know, ask for forgiveness later. But in this case, I truly feel like we were given poor information or poor direction, and you know, asking us to modify this roof line. I don't know. I have every single neighbor we have is in support of us, and I don't know what to tell you. I don't see anyone here opposing us either tonight. So every person I've talked to in this village is behind us. Maybe, and I right, and I understand where your position is too. I completely do. I understand that. But you have to understand where our position is too. We're a young family in this community. We're going to be here for our whole life in this house.
Yeah.
So we're not just here, you know. And we're not the new kids on the block either. We moved here 7 years ago. We've been in this house for 7 years. We're trying to, all we do is talk about how great this community is, how wonderful this community is. And I understand you don't want to set a precedence moving forward, but what you don't think about is you're impacting 5 lives forever in this community. And I know you might not sympathize with that, but
About people with Lyme disease, we care about people. I mean,
well, we just sat here for 2 hours and listened about everything, and I get it, and
I agree,
and that's, you know what, honestly, I truly sat here, and some of it I laughed at, all of it I loved it. I was like, people are passionate about that. That's what makes it great here.
Right.
You're not just a number. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's the difference here in this city, and so I'm just asking to not be a number. Honestly, that's it. And you know what? If I could go back and do it again, I wouldn't hire the Oak Park architect. We'd go hire someone else that knew what the hell they were doing and could give us better direction. And it's been a long road.
Yeah, I
man.
know.
It has.
You
So
guys are exhausted.
just
I'm
know
exhausted.
we're exhausted. So
We're living in my little brother's basement. Who moved in a couple of months ago because we asked them to. So now we're living on mattresses in his basement with our 3 little boys. This is our 5th place that we moved in. We moved all over the city for months at a time, thinking it was just going to take 3 months, and then something would happen, and then we just need another 3 months, and then something else happened, and another 3 months. It was our first goal. We thought this was going to take 5 months, 4 months. We're here over a year later. Like, we didn't expect any of this. We can't afford any of it. We didn't know we were gonna have to do another roof. We didn't know we were gonna have to do this, that. We can't even afford what we have. Really, if we're being honest, we should have bought a new house and let this be someone else's problem. But we took on this old home as our own and did the best we could. And we fell short. And that's why we're here asking that you don't have us scrap a perfectly structurally sound roof, add it to the landfill, and have us lower it 14 inches.
Yeah. Like I said to somebody else, the other topic would have been easier than this one. So, any other questions that you have for? I mean, I don't know what else where to go with this. I think we understand your position. We certainly understand the issues with our zoning and our inspector and everything else. I don't know where else to go with it other than to say if you have any further questions.
Never had anyone oppose us as well. We've never had anyone voice
An opposition.
So, I mean, unfortunately, it's you, but there's a bigger picture here, right? And that's the problem that we're all having. So I don't think there's anybody sitting at this table that doesn't sympathize with your situation. But again, we several months ago, we turned somebody down, you know, for an increase in the floor area ratio. And so, you know, is that person gonna come back? You know, is the next person gonna come up? And I mean, so that's what we're struggling with. And so, you know, again, we're all sympathetic to what happened to you, what's happening to you right now. But again, it's the bigger picture that we have to respond to.
All right, I'll just remind the board, the motion and the second is in the affirmative, like we do with most of our all of our motions. So voting yes would to be to grant the variation. Voting no would be to deny the variation.
Right. Thank you for that. Hearing no questions, let's go ahead.
Trustee Vasquez.
No.
Trustee Brennan.
No.
Trustee Hennick.
I absolutely struggle with this one, as we all do. On one hand, I could see that there are a mix of mistakes that happened. In terms of our commissions, I do tend to give them deference unless I'm pointing to something to override their decision, and it was 6-1 approval. But I absolutely have the concern about the precedent, and I know we're at the point of voting, but my question would be in terms of even what we'd even conceivably do to avoid this in the future. Whether it's a case of changing direction of our inspections or what, I don't know.
Well, that's I would say a separate conversation, Trustee.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's an outcome of this, certainly.
I'm sorry, I have a hard one, and I guess I'm going to go with the ZBA's decision. I'm not happy about that, only because I do have the concern about the precedent, but I do support the fact that they looked at it and voted 6-1 to approve it. I'm going to vote yes.
Okay. Trustee O'Connell.
No.
Trustee Bachner.
No.
Like
Trustee-
Daddy, I struggle with this one. I spent more time on this than I did on the deer, to be honest with you. And my concern, as I said before, was not just the precedent, but the hardship provision of the zoning code isn't intended to address the situation. I think your recourse lies in actions against the professional because they're the ones that screwed up. And so it just wrenches the entire zoning process out of what it's intended to be. This isn't intended to fix problems that professionals make. It's intended to permit people to build on property that's not suitable to build on or is difficult to build on. And so in light of that, I got to vote no.
Okay, so it fails.
Motion fails.
All right. Right. We'll go on to our 10B, which is a discussion on the Park District. What?
Levy ordinance?
Oh, we didn't even do 9. Okay. 9A. If I can get a motion in a second. Go ahead. Take a motion.
Motion to approve an ordinance levy taxes for corporate purposes for the current fiscal year commencing May 1, 2019 and ending on April 30th, 2020 for the Village of Aurora Forest. The amount of $8,135,161.
Okay. Any questions?
There's been no changes on this since it was originally introduced.
Okay, thank
So
you.
if the estimate, you tell me this every year, but I keep forgetting, the estimate on this is, and the estimate on the property that will come online and be taxable is low, we just, that part of the levy is cut back.
Yes, the county will shave that back.
Okay. Okay, take the vote, please.
Trustee Brennan.
Yes.
Trustee Hennick.
Yes.
Trustee O'Connell.
Yes.
Trustee Bachner.
Yes.
Trustee Kargi.
Yes.
Trustee Vasquez.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Okay, then we'll go on to 10B, discussion on Park District. I don't think we need a motion, we're just gonna discuss it, right?
Yep. Real quickly, the Park District is looking to make some improvements to Priory Park in terms of their entranceway off of William. They had come in for permit and been approved for permit. They followed all the permit requirements and to repave that asphalt to asphalt. And so when it got across to my desk after the fact that they were doing this, after I talked with the village president, I thought it would be a good idea to go meet with the park board, just to talk to them a little bit about some of the things we've been doing here in the village in terms of using other more impervious solutions as it relates to projects such as these. And admittedly, it's a unique project. It's a smaller scoped project. And so I went to the park board, spoke under public comment more or less. Igor wrote a wonderful article, and he's here tonight. The idea here was that when these situations come up, number one, we want you, the park board, to know that the village is a resource in case you have questions or concerns or looking at other best practices. Just like we may not be subject matter experts in certain areas, I certainly wouldn't expect the park district to be that as well. So when things come up, they contact the village engineer or my staff. Also point them in the direction of other grant opportunities that may be available to take on these types of projects. After spending a full summer working on the NSMP to create a stormwater system up on the north side, we become as sensitive as possible to trying to keep as much stormwater out of our system. So that was really the genesis of that conversation. As part of that conversation, the park board did ask if the village would be willing to partner financially with any type of future project that would involve some impervious surface. I did say I would bring that back to you for discussion. Certainly there are grant opportunities. We've done so with the MWRD. And in many cases, we've spent a considerable amount of money on our own to implement those. And of course, the alleys would be the one I would point to that as we do these projects, the cost to reconstruct the alley with the permeable solution is significantly higher. And I've told that to the park board. I'm not coming here trying to find the cheapest solution for you. The solution I'm going to provide you financially, dollars and cents, will cost you more. But what other benefits are we getting as we try to quantify things, right? Where we're quantifying stormwater and keeping that out of our system. And that certainly may not be your priority, but it certainly is ours. And so I just asked them to reconsider that. We're going to have conversations about if there's what other things we can do to try to create another option for that walkway. That won't probably happen to the spring. They haven't certainly ruled out the fact that they would go back and do asphalt. That's certainly not off the table. So hopefully we can convince them otherwise. But I did want to bring back the recommendation, or their ask, if you will, about the village providing some sort of grant or some sort of money to help with this. We have not done that for anybody else. So I would just point that out in terms of the precedent. I don't necessarily believe we'd be in a position to start doing that. That's just my opinion. But if you feel otherwise, that's why from a policy standpoint, I'm bringing this to you.
Questions?
Well, I think it's a great idea to use permeable pavers. We've done that at the Thatcher lot also. And actually, although the commuter lot on Thatcher, although it cost more initially, the numbers worked out that it actually is supposed to save the village money because it will last longer. So hopefully that message doesn't need to be passed on to the Park District. They know it because Mike Slutton and Ross Roloff were on the Park Foundation board when we made that pitch to the village to do it. So they know that.
Okay.
We levy to provide services that are a responsibility under the Illinois law, and I think that prosecute if we start using levy that was intended for one thing for another service in the purview of another taxable body. My wife's gonna hate me for that, but
Is part of the question around partnering just using our resources to find other opportunities and grants that might be available?
We would always be happy to do that just because we have good relationships with our partners. So that we will do.
Yeah, they're asking for money.
It's more of they want money to,
I'm inclined to say no.
Of course not.
Okay. All right, so let's go on to the next discussion, which is, what do we got?
The board packet procedures. So Trustee Hennick and
Yep.
Brennan had asked this be on the agenda. I don't know if they realized we'd be talking about it at 10:40 at night, but it's It is on the agenda, so we have kept our word.
Yeah, so this was several meetings ago that I asked this during trustee comments, or I meant to, and then I didn't, and so I had to refer to it later. It's a challenge when you're working full-time and you're getting close, a 300, 400-page packet at close of business on Friday and working on Monday, and getting through the packet and then additional research and calls and that kind of thing. I know on the Sustainability Commission, we got our packets on Thursday for a Tuesday meeting. And I think in Oak Park, they at least give the agenda maybe on the Tuesday before the following Monday meeting. So any bit that we can have in advance would be a big help and much appreciated.
I would agree with that for sure. Again, when we kind of touched on when we brought this up, when I brought it up again at our last meeting, it's a combination of having an idea of what's going to be on the agenda in order to kind of plan accordingly, most especially when it's a big topic. I have also found, and in part it was even this deer topic, because I did expect to have more of a report or some further information, I wasn't necessarily expending my time outside of that until I got that information. Because if I was going to get it, I didn't need to do, which would be true on other topics too. So I don't necessarily, depending on what may be coming up, sometimes if I do know, I can kind of start my research and do some of my thinking about things ahead of time. But there are times that's not the case, and I'm not going to do all this work thinking it's going to be a particular topic, and then it actually ends up changing when the time it comes on, or when it will come on, because again, I have to manage my time around other topics, around other things that are going on. I'll just throw out another example. Back when we discussed sprinklers, came on top of a lot of other, it was very full agenda. And so it's just that kind of, and it's like to do that. Now I did it, and obviously I agreed to be on the board, recognizing I was going to have to put time into it. I most often block out my weekend knowing that I have to allow time, but it would also be nice to have some warning on information. I think residents have also shared, knowing to be, if they don't get it till Friday or it doesn't go out till Friday, a lot of people aren't necessarily thinking about it or looking at it till Sunday or Monday or over the weekend sometimes. So then to think in terms of even planning to attend a meeting, and I get it, things are going to change in terms of being fluid as far as what goes on and waiting for information. But I think unless something is super time sensitive, it almost seems like we could gear towards it being on an agenda one week, but if we're waiting for documents, then it's going to have to get pushed to the next one so we have enough time to really go through the information. Does that make sense?
So are you suggesting the agenda goes out early? Because your last comment was one that I was kind of thinking about. Is there anything in here from a financial standpoint that, that comes down to the 11th hour, I guess, and I know that's very, fluid or whatever, but, to have an agenda out a couple of days ahead of time is one thing. To have a packet out a week or so or 5 days before a meeting, does that have any impact on the staff and the decisions that you need to make as administrator?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if it's a week, you want to move the packet up a week, absolutely. Yeah. Many times things are, here's what I would say. 95% of what you approve is fairly routine. Not to say that you're not reading it or verifying it, but we're buying vehicles and computers and things like that. The big items, though, I would say, I think we do a decent job of getting that on your radar screen ahead of time. So how do I look? So you almost look at it in two buckets, right? You have the bucket of information that is routine, and then you have the big item bucket. And so items like developments and even the deer. We all knew this was going to be on the agenda for some time. We had put that out there. So I guess here we work for you. So you tell us what your expectation is, and we will go ahead and meet it. But if we're going to move it up a week, I have to go back and think about that.
My concern
Right.
is, generally speaking,
Right.
I get through. I've been doing it for a while now, so I usually do it on Sundays. I get through the packet, and that's so giving it to me a week early doesn't really change. Going to change my process, but I probably still won't look at it till Sunday. But my concern is the burden on the staff, and I don't know what that is. I mean, I would think at some point, at least for routine things, you adjust to it because now instead of getting something done by Thursday, you get it done by Tuesday. So, but I am concerned about that because, doing this stuff for us is important, but they have many more important things to do. And so I don't want the administrative hassle of moving up the schedule to interfere with the more fundamental job that everybody does. So that's the question I ask you.
And well, I think you answered it.
Yeah.
I mean, right? I don't want to put your words in your
No,
mouth.
I mean,
think
if
you said
we're
it.
talking about what someone suggested was about a week earlier. So if you're having, and I interpret that to be if you have a Monday meeting, it's the Monday before. So the challenge with that would be is that we would have to get the packet out. Basically, staff would be working on their memos for the next meeting by the end of this week.
Yeah. I just can't imagine. I mean, again, talk about a problem, a solution, searching for a problem. I think our packets are readable and doable during the week, and most of the information we discuss prior. Again, the big ones for sure. Any big ones we always discuss prior in either a prior meeting or with emails. So there's a lot of information that gets exchanged. I think it also comes with unintended consequences. So things may not get on the board agenda because they may not be able to get it on, within that time frame. And so if it moves 2 more weeks, and then sometimes in the summer, it may move 2 months because we don't meet. So I just think even an agenda item, there will be things that will come on and off, not just the detail on an agenda item. I've seen where in the last minute, you put on an agenda item because you want it to meet that date because there's a date sensitive issue.
So I don't know the rules around doing this, but I mean, if you had a preliminary agenda that came out whatever, Wednesday or whatever, and then the final packet with the final agenda comes out on Friday, does that help people get their arms around things? I'm just asking.
Sure, it might, but here's the consequences of it. Somebody who reads the a draft agenda and it changes, and you here, how many people do we have here? And they said we never showed data and never got information. It's all, whatever. We can argue both ways. That will be constant in my mind. Okay. Is that I didn't, and especially for a very important issue. So I just think.
And sometimes, quite frankly, things do come on and off, even between a Wednesday and a Thursday, depending on what may happen. It doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen.
Yeah.
So I guess my point would be setting the expectation that I give you something on Wednesday, and then by Thursday, whatever that date is, the potential is something will change.
Right.
Are there open meeting act implications with changing your agenda midstream? Or as long as it's 48 hours is the actual agenda that's posted?
Right. You can, as long as you do not add things within 48 hours of meeting, you're okay. You can always take things off in less than 48 hours.
And to be clear, I would not be comfortable or recommend, if this is a draft, it's a draft for the board as a working draft document. I would not suggest publishing that. Because then I think you're setting an expectation, and then we're going to get into this dialogue about, well, we're not being transparent, and why did you pull that off? And there's one thing with maybe. Again, I'm not.
I mean, I look on this agenda. I guess I'll ask you guys, what would you have done? What was on here that you didn't know? That you would have had a tough time? We knew the deer. We certainly knew the zoning board. I don't know. I mean, the consent agendas maybe, but that's going to be consent agendas. I don't know what's so deep about that.
Well, I'll say, the variation issue took up a lot of time, and maybe I would have, if I would have seen that a few days ahead of time, if I had time, during the week, maybe I would have listened to the ZBA minutes, and driven by the house. If I had
We do. I do want to be clear though that a lot of that information is transmitted in the monthly reports in
Yeah.
terms of things coming down the pike.
Yeah.
So
They're all there.
There is. I just want to be fair because and I understand that they're not the sexiest reports always. So, and my staff knows I love them, but that information is conveyed. So when these things come down the bike, like for zoning, Lisa puts that stuff in her monthly reports.
Yeah. Her monthly report is fabulous, actually. It shows all the development in the different, in the different phases that it's at, what's left. I mean, it's a very good, and in fact, I have to give Carmela credit for that. She was the one that recommended that, and it made a lot of sense.
And I put zoning variations on there
Yeah.
more recently.
Right.
Because I know we do have new trustees who may have more questions
Right.
about definitions, processes, what's actually going on to try to give you more of a heads up. Now, again, I understand there's a lot of information in different areas and different pieces that we pulled together for you. But
Yeah, that report is excellent. We keep forgetting about it, but it's a great report. And it's, I mean, you'll know what the next variance is because she's already have what phase it is. It's in the findings of fact, it's in the approval phase. So. And then even that information's on the website. So if you said, hey, I would like to have seen some of the data, you could have gone on the website. It's there. I don't know.
And so, in terms of even just giving us a day and giving the community a day to, get it in their emails for those who get the email about the agenda and the packet, is that something that is potentially.
So, like, instead of Friday, like a Thursday?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like a Thursday evening versus a Friday evening? Because that's what it comes out right now. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Thursday afternoon versus a Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
Thursday by close of business.
Yeah, that's when it typically close of business. Yeah, I don't think that's terribly.
No,
I think what you're requesting is not.
No,
terribly
I don't think that's unreasonable.
I mean, that's that's.
Like I said, at the end of the day, I work for you. You set the expectation level on what you want. I'm just sharing with you some of my concerns if we do certain things. But if we want it, we can also start out incrementally. So that would be the.
I think that's a great idea.
The incremental move.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of I used to be a bureaucrat too. So I used to work in government for 15 years. I used to review board packets. So all that rush, we felt that we were always maybe a couple of days or maybe at most a week before we were in the next cycle of, okay, now we get to get the packet again together. I'm sympathetic because the staff have this cycle of paperwork. I mean, they have to put a lot of work into it. I know we do too, but the amount they have to, I'm sure it's a lot more than what we have. Now, mind you, they're working day to day. I get it, it's their job. But the other concern I have about the Thursday thing, and this has come up before, in my experience, not yours, but I'm anticipating, that if something comes up on a Friday, you're going to potentially add it, and then we're going to have to deal with that, or are we going to accept, and we've tried this before and then we went back to just walk it on Friday, but do we say, hey, we're not going to accept anything after we get that packet on Thursday, unless it's a real emergency? And then
That's a tough one.
And that's a tough one.
Because
and
we don't meet a lot.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
something may come up. So,
that's
so we have to understand what that means, and we still may get, because it tends to be the controversial ones come in at the last minute because of all the paperwork that needs to be put, or new issues come up. I don't know.
Right.
I'm just saying we have to be understanding about that, or are we going to? I'm assuming we're going to accept it on that Friday, and then we have the same issue.
Yeah, so my assumption in asking for an agenda on
Right.
a Thursday afternoon versus Friday is that if something comes up on Friday, it would then go to the next meeting.
Okay, that's okay.
Right, which is a little bit of a problem, Erica, because
Right.
we don't, in summer, we only meet once a month. So if there's something that, like, you have a situation like this, that they're waiting for their zoning to get approved, they'd have to wait 30 days. Because it jumps over.
Yeah, those we typically can know about and plan out. I mean, to me, it's here would be a great example. Someone comes in last minute for a license agreement for a sprinkler system. So, and it's a summer schedule. They come in, the permit comes in on certain day, and we may not get to it Friday. Do I rush to amend the agenda so this guy can get his sprinkler system permit in, or do I make him wait 2 weeks? So the customer service in me, which you have trained me very well on, would say, let's amend the agenda so the guy can get his sprinkler packet on. The bureaucrat in me would say, no, sorry, you're gonna have to wait 2 weeks.
Can we
Now, if you
just to do those without board approval?
Yeah, I mean, that particular
Yeah.
example,
Yes.
it's kind of a
Because we already
no-brainer.
have the standard
the-
agreement,
I think
right?
Consent agenda.
The village board could delegate that authority to staff if you wanted to. You haven't thus far, but it's possible.
But again, I think you do that to try to keep everyone involved.
Big win, Tom.
Yeah. You can have it. I mean, people
Right.
want to do
address
more.
some problems.
You guys want to do
Right.
less. That's cool
Because it's a
too.
standard agreement, right?
Yeah.
All right,
The
so
months that you only have one meeting, can you make that Friday, and the other months when you have multiple
guess.
meetings, make it Thursday?
Well, it depends if you
I
want
just don't know
a
what the
bright
problem
line
solving.
for it, or if you want me to exercise a certain amount of discretion. Again, or we can just kind of play it out and see how it goes. I
So-
think going to Thursday seems to be like a good start. As long as you cut me a little slack or a little rope, on some of these issues and how they come
Don't
up.
say rope.
Okay,
Yeah, I'll take
sorry.
the
And
rope.
I can bring them up to you too. And we can talk about them. Like, is this
Yeah.
something you want?
Sure.
Moved into? I mean, I'm not going to
Right.
act like a consensus, but I can certainly
Right.
share these issues as
Right.
they arise.
Well, I
Alright.
mean, and from your experience, would you say, if you're saying Thursday, end of day, what's the likelihood or how often? I mean, I know you're not gonna have a certain number, but realistically, how often is something gonna come between Friday morning and Friday end of day that's gonna change the agenda from Thursday night?
okay, maybe nothing, but we don't want. I don't think he wants to leave you with the impression that it may never happen. See, again,
And I appreciate that. I mean, I already
think
said,
that's-
I recognize that
Right.
the,
I think
it can be
that's what
fluid,
the-
that our
Right.
agenda is
It's
fluid,
no-
absolutely.
no different.
And sometimes too, yeah, it's a good
I mean-
example. I mean, there's, there have been recent times too when we know when something's going on. So I can put it on the agenda. I'm still trying to work through negotiations,
Right.
especially on economic development related items. That's something else that comes to mind, or I could tell you this is forthcoming, but I'm still having a conversation with the developer, or there's a conference last week, and you'll be getting communication with me on a couple things that took place last week. There was a call on Friday, and that didn't lead to anything, but those things become very fluid because you're responding to other people's schedules and timelines as well. So here, look, I think we can move it to Thursday. I don't think that's going to significantly rock the boat, but we'll monitor these situations when they come up. And I guess what I'm just asking for is a little flexibility as we move forward.
Absolutely.
All right, you got
Thank
it.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So simple to do. All right.
No, sir.
I move
I-
to adjourn.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Oh, that's enough.